Constellation is sponsored by Raycon's Everyday Earbuds, which you can learn more about right now at buyraycon.com/constellation, getting 20% off your order and free shipping in the process. It's me, Micah, Last Dance coordinator, co-host of Punching Up, and Colin's wife. So while Colin's been helldiving as of late, or while he's banging away on his drums, I've been laying on the couch playing Persona 3 on my Switch, and my Raycon Everyday Earbuds have proven essential during my Japanese high school adventure. With 8 hours of playtime before needing a charge, different sets of optimized gel tips for your ear shape included, and coming within a small, sleek case, needless to say, I highly recommend Raycon's Everyday Earbuds. Go to buyraycon.com/constellation today. That's buyraycon.com/constellation to get 20% off your Raycon order plus free shipping. That's right, you'll get 20% off and free shipping at buyraycon.com/constellation. Again, that's buyraycon.com/constellation.
Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan Moriarty. Dagan, I got me a Chrysler. It's as big as a whale, and it's about to set sail. I said that's a B-52's impression, of course.
I know, but is it because he looks like Fred Schneider?
No. I wish he kind of maybe does a little bit, but yeah. No, that was like my favorite impression. I used to love doing impressions of that song when I was a little kid. And it just randomly came up on my Spotify playlist. And so I sent it to my siblings and it was on my mind. So I had to do it because I love doing it. I guess it's kind of
Jukebox money.
Yeah, jukebox money. You know,
so good.
Oh my God, song rules. How are you, Dave? How was Florida?
Wasn't as good as Rome. Yeah. Sorry, I'm done.
No, Rome is great too.
That's the best.
No doubt.
All right.
The intro of Rome is so good. Dave, go on. How is everything? How's Florida? How's life?
Everything's good. Yeah, back from vacay, fresh off of not fresh off the plane, a couple of days off the plane from FLA. It was a little unseasonably cool down there, but still logged some beach time and just chilled with the fam. I got something here, especially for this.
Are you going to pull your dick out?
This cash.
Oh, okay.
Oh, what is that?
Oh.
What do you mean? That's my prop. I always have that.
Hello, Dagan.
What do you think? You're the only one? No, I got mine. Mine's made of licorice.
Oh, it's not a real pipe? Oh, I was impressed for a moment.
Yeah, it's a real licorice pipe.
Gene's like, I work for the fucking Washington Post, bitches. What the fuck am I doing here? Shit.
I know. My God. Well, Dave, good to have you back in the fold.
Good to be back.
Gene Park, Punching Up Zone, Washington Post Zone. How are you today, my friend? Good to see you.
Good to be back. I'm also back from Vegas. I was hanging out at a DICE summit for the last week. Caught COVID there. So I'm a little quieter if I sound nasally. I'm still getting over that. I'm actually COVID negative now. So that's nice. And I was able to quickly get prescribed some antiviral medication that actually just made me feel better, like immediately. Like just killed it in like a day.
Horse paste?
Huh?
Horse paste?
Is that horse tranquilizer? Yeah.
You say
horse?
Yeah. Did bleach? Clorox?
Clorox.
It's called Paxlovid.
It's funny, man. I was just saying this. I'm afraid to verbalize it over and over again, but whatever. I don't know if I've ever gotten COVID. At least I don't. If I did, I didn't know.
Yeah, I don't. Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Is anybody vaccinated on this show?
I have both of the original vaccines, but I haven't gotten it since.
Right. No, I haven't gotten COVID either. I was just curious.
I haven't gotten the most recent vaccine actually. So.
No, I don't. When it became clear that the vaccine wasn't a vaccine, I was like, yeah, it's because I was getting it specifically for my mom. Right. I was like, I don't want to be the one responsible for giving my elderly parents this disease. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't do that. It's like, oh, no, okay. And then I guess there's really no need for me to.
Yeah, because it's not gonna stop the spread. It's just gonna make sure that you don't die.
Right. Like kind of when we all got the polio vaccine and then some of us got it. Anyway, just the same thing.
Yeah.
David,
you know what though? What? Almost everybody I know who's been to Vegas since 2020-ish has gotten COVID there.
Yeah.
If they spent a meaningful amount of time there. So it's still the hotbed.
I'll be going there in a couple months, so hopefully I don't.
I didn't get it until the tail end, and everyone I hung out with didn't get it either. But I did hang out with Marty O'Donnell like right before I left because he was smoking a cigarette, and I saw him just like right outside the casino, and so he was just like smoking like right into my face. And I started coughing, and then I got into the plane.
What a nice show!
I got fucking with Marty O'Donnell. So,
hey, I'm not going to say the name, but you mentioned to me that you ran into a pal of mine, and you met a pal of mine there that had some drama swirling around them. Did you get any input or data on what the fuck went down with that, or no?
No.
Okay, I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck happened exactly with that firing. But
yeah. No. That person just wanted to say hi and said that they really enjoyed my work and everything.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
So it was very nice.
Colin,
and that person was Bill Gates.
No, that person was a big Sony rigmarole that's no longer there.
Well, there you go. David Jaffe, it's you, my friend. Good to see you. The whole Shack Shimmies. Good to have you here with us today, my friend.
I'm until you do 10 roof. I'm not saying anything. Oh yeah, that wasn't Fred. That was her, right?
No, it was the blonde chick.
Yeah, that was her.
Rock Lobster. Different song. I know. But I'm doing well. I was going to tell you. I don't fucking know. I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me. I appreciate the day. I appreciate I don't have COVID. Look at me. I'm Caillou. Remember Caillou?
Jaffe, no, I know who you look like. I look like Jim Norton.
People have said that, but I don't know who that is. I had somebody tell me I look like the dean from Community, though, which made me very sad. But that said, though, he's funny.
You do kind of have a Jim Norton thing. You know, Jim Norton was like, this is a weird thing about Jim Norton. I don't know him personally, but it was he and Rogan on Rogan's podcast that talked about what happened to me at Kind of Funny the day it happened.
Oh,
and that was how that whole thing went down. So Jim Norton was somehow aware of that situation.
So he's a comedian.
Yeah, he's a comedian. You would know him if you saw him for sure.
Oh, okay.
And by the way, what's going on with so you kind of shave down? I totally get it because I do the same. I don't go all the way down, but I often just take it to the buzzer
it's not. I said to somebody on my stream the other day because they're like, a bunch of people were like, "Oh, I like it," and so I'm like, "I don't like that," and I was just like going, "Okay, first, motherfucker, I don't do it for you. Trust me, I'm not a good looking guy enough that I'm in the habit of caring what I look like. I got over that a long time ago.
I can't jerk off to this anymore.
Right, pretty much.
That's what you're saying, right?
You know that, yeah. And but no, honestly,
this isn't gonna work anymore for me.
The reason I have the beard when I have it is the same reason I have this when I have it, which is I'm simply a man of convenience and the lowest barrier of entry. So for me, it got to the point, it wasn't even the beard. It was the hair was getting too itchy and showers were taking too long. And I couldn't do this with a cold Coke, which feels delightful when you put a Coke on your head.
Yeah.
And so I just, buzzed the hair and it was gone. But then my beard looked like a chia pet. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to take the time to trim it because I don't know how to do that. And I'm not going to take the time to learn how to do it. So I just went, and now I'm this. So it's all practical. It's all practical.
You look wonderful, I think.
Well, thank you, Colin.
I'm already used to it.
Yeah, I was just saying, he looks exactly like how he did in like the early 2000s.
Hey, I'm here to talk about Twisted Metal, guys. Twisted Metal is
Twisted Metal 3.5 is just coming out right now, man. Jesus.
Oh God. Listen, though, I have a question for Dagan real quick before we get started, if you don't mind. This show coming out next month on, I don't know what network it is. I'm sure it'll be on Hulu as well, though. Quiet on the Set, about all the shit happening at Nickelodeon back in the day when you were.
Oh, I saw a yes.
Were you around for that? And did any of that shit like cross your path and you're like, dude, this is bad? Or you don't know anything other than anybody else?
No, nobody knew. New York Nickelodeon then and now was very tuned in to the animated side of Nick Jr. only, as far as we knew. It was very insulated from live action component, Paramount and Viacom at large and all that kind of stuff.
Man, so that thing sounds something. That sounds like some shit went down there.
It's bad for Nickelodeon, I think.
I think so too.
And Paramount and at large and So.
If you don't know there's a show coming out called Quiet on the Set, mostly focused on, I think it's Dan Schneider, but a lot of the Nickelodeon executives, I guess, were pedophiles. And not a lot. That's wrong. There was 3 official ones that were found to be in possession of pedophile content and doing stuff, but there was a lot of shit going down. Schneider, I don't think, was a pedophile. He was just a sexual abuser, like just a sexual abuser. But man, that sounds terrible. What a disaster.
Yeah, I definitely
slaughterhouse for kids.
Yeah, it is awful, especially because the shows they're talking about too are like a little after my time, because I was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, I know them because my kids.
Right. And like at 39, yeah, I kind of tapped out probably a little late from Nickelodeon, but maybe in like 7th or 8th grade.
Yeah.
So that was like Hey Arnold, and there was some live action stuff, probably the tail end of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Alex Mack, I loved that show.
Oh, hell yeah.
I had such a crush on her when I was a kid.
Dude,
and then she ended up in Mad Men, which was funny. Alyssa Olenek or whatever her name is.
That's right.
Do you remember that remake of, what was it a remake of? They did 10 Things I Hate About You, but it's not Hamlet. It's
the Taming of the Shrew
or something. The Taming of the Shrew, that's what it was. The Taming of the Shrew, yeah, which is so interesting. So she was.
I've never seen that. I was showing the trailer to my kid the other day, and we were just looking at old 90s trailers, and he's like, "That looks good." I'm like, "Yeah, I hear it's awesome, but I've never fucking seen 10 Things, but I hear it's great."
Yeah, what's I don't remember anyone's name. The guy that died that played Joker,
and Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles.
Right? Yeah, good cast.
Constellation is sponsored by Raycon's Everyday Earbuds, which you can learn more about right now at buyraycon.com/constellation, getting 20% off your order and free shipping in the process. It's me, Micah, Last Dance coordinator, co-host of Punching Up, and Colin's wife. For purposes of this ad, that last part may be the most important. See, Colin and I are together all the time, and we both love playing games, listening to music, and so on, but we don't usually do those things together. So while Colin's been helldiving as of late, or while he's banging away on his drums, I've been laying on the couch playing Persona 3 on my Switch, and my Raycon Everyday Earbuds have proven essential during my Japanese high school adventures. These earbuds are extremely high quality, including built-in sound profiles, tap functionality, noise isolation, and even a useful awareness mode for when Colin gets up from his recliner and talks to me about the space bugs he's killed or whatever other madness comes from him on any given day. Of course, these earbuds are more valuable than just gaming, music, Netflix, browsing your phone, whatever. Raycon's everyday earbuds are fantastic, especially when you consider they're about half the price of many of their competitors. With 8 hours of playtime before needing a charge, different sets of optimized gel tips for your ear shape included, and coming within a small, sleek case, needless to say, I highly recommend Raycon's everyday earbuds. Go to buyraycon.com/constellation today. That's BUYRAYCON.com/CONSTELLATION to get 20% off your Raycon order plus free shipping. That's right, you'll get 20% off and free shipping at buyraycon.com/constellation. Again, that's buyraycon.com/constellation.
All right, so we gathered today, boys. I wanted to get this particular permutation today for this idea. So I emailed Micah at the beginning of the year, who coordinates all of our shows, and I'm like, I want to do one-off shows of Constellation on topics. Not topics, but let's say like ecosystems. So I want to do a sports show at some point. We're going to do maybe a movies thing. We're going to do a music thing with Ramon at some point. But I wanted to do politics, and I wanted this particular group of people to do it. People think I'm a very political person, and I am, but I've really tried to go out of my way on Constellation, generally speaking, to not get too political. Not for any other reason that I don't know. People are probably a little exhausted about it, but these are the 3. I don't want to say Dagan's one of us. Dagan's here because he's the co-host and he's welcome here, and I don't want to put him in a position, so I let him opt in or opt out to this podcast. But the 3 of us are definitely like the political people in the network, and I wanted to get us together just to chat about whatever topics we wanted to, but that were political. So there was no other guardrail other than that. I think we have a pretty interesting selection. Jaffe, did you decide on the election stuff you wanted to do?
Yeah, I did, but it kind of dovetails into something else. So I can, if whenever we're ready for mine, I'll. But what I texted you though is the bedrock for the conversation.
Okay.
But it kind of goes elsewhere after I've done a lot of research on it.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, I want to start with Dagan, actually, because he has probably the loosest and easiest topic of the 4, and it would be nice to wish.
Oh, I thought you were going to say vagina.
By the way, shout out to the guy I played Helldivers 2 with, Vagicarp.
Oh, my.
Loved playing with him.
I hear you're into Banishers.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
It's great, isn't
It's
it? Excellent.
so good, dude.
Yeah.
It really is. It's exactly what you're talking about like a very appropriately
Scoped.
length, scoped, everything. Yeah, financial.
And just
I'm sure
really
it's
well written and interesting, and yeah, it's very cool.
a lot of production value, surprising amount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I talked about that on Summon Sign recently. Yeah, I'm glad you're liking it too. I don't know if anyone's playing it. I don't think they are. Dag, let's begin with you, and then we'll spin out from there in any way we'd like to go.
Okay. This pipe is delicious. I can't stop. Not usually a licorice guy, but this is
Really, yeah. Licorice kind of.
It's not bad.
Black licorice, even. Come on now. Who does black licorice? That's crazy. That's hardcore.
I know. So German.
Yeah.
Well, listen. I figured I was either going to be leading off or batting cleanup. So why not lead off? I'm just going to lob you guys a softball. I figured how to do a Dagster spin on this because I'm not the most political dude in the world. And I thought, and I've been very into this anyway. I'm a huge fan. And I thought I would lob this one to you guys. Jon Stewart's return to The Daily Show. And of course, there probably are several threads to tug here. We could talk about Jon Stewart as a personality, as a comic, as a popular sort of political presence in our culture, or we could talk about The Daily Show. I mean, it's a show with a history dating back, 28 years now or something. We could talk about how we like to consume our news and how we like to ingest our current events. But personally, for me, this was a cool one to see Jon Stewart come back. Not only because I'm a fan, but personally, I always did like a spoonful of sugar with my medicine. I mean, that's very much my personality. I really like getting my news in an entertaining way. That just works for me. And I think I always responded to the levity of ingesting the news that way, which probably started with things like The Daily Show in the mid-90s, in my early 20s, and making something a little lighter out of something that could be heavy, or just maybe even stuff that you're properly anxious about, and being able to take a more pleasant sort of philosophy on staying on top of what's happening in the world. And that sort of style always spoke to me, sort of getting my news with much less of a lump in my throat, if you will. Just a more fun for me and much less depressing way of staying informed and looking at things, I think, through the lens of comedy and satire, which I think speaks to my personality and comforts me a little bit. And here's the thing I want to pose to you guys, though, as I kick it over. For me, I can sift through the bias, whichever way the bias is coming from, when I watch TV news in general, no matter what it is. Though I know that sort of baked in political affiliation bothers a lot of people. For me, I could wade through that and get to the news or be entertained by it. I don't get offended by it, that sort of thing. But from what I see so far with Jon Stewart coming back after his initial, whatever it was, 17-year run or whatever before he left and Trevor Noah took over for a little while, I like what he seems to be doing in kind of presenting as an equal opportunity ball buster with this whole thing. He's giving it to both sides and letting the right and the left both have it and kind of raking them all over the coals regardless. And I think that's really cool. What I love to see with this sort of thing, regardless of my political leanings personally, right, is the idea of just a sweeping sense of calling it like you see it. That's, for me, I think that sort of applies to both sides. You know what I mean? I think the honesty of that is very refreshing. And I think it's really important, especially right now, to reintroduce that sense of it's okay to laugh at my own side. You know, it's okay to be self-deprecating. It's okay to say we could be doing better, or, you know what, this is ridiculous. Like, kind of the other side has a point. I could reach across the aisle and say, you know what, we're being ridiculous, that sort of thing. So I know Jon Stewart's a politically divisive dude, especially if you're not a left-leaning person, but I kind of like the flavor he's bringing with this new Daily Show. And the fact of, I guess the conceit was he wanted to do it. He wanted to stay on Apple. And Apple, basically told him, you know what, we think we're worried you're going to get yourself in trouble. So went over back to the Paramount side. And
I thought it was a China thing. They wouldn't let him run his China story.
Yeah, that's what as I understand it too.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, they were. As I understand it, they were basically like, you can't talk about these topics
Because they're so affiliated with China.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that being a big part of it. So I'll throw it over to you, Jaffe, next. Where do you stand on Jon Stewart in general, or any of the threads I mentioned? However you want to.
Well, allow me to say first, I can't find a pen. So if you see me looking over here and I'm typing notes based on this because I can't write them. So I'm not distracted or anything. I'm just don't want to be rude.
No, it's all good.
But,
no worries.
Okay. Well, I mean, I like Jon Stewart. I'm a very progressive fella. So of course, my politics line up with his, but as you say, there's value in recognizing that bias and recognizing, he's preaching to the choir with me for the most part. Obviously, there's the stuff outside of his show, like when he went to bat for the firefighters and the people of New York when it came to the World Trade Center, which is kind of undeniably heroic and patriotic, and only a goblin living under a bridge would, attack that, action. But I very much like him. I love smart people. I love educated people, but at the same time, I have to recognize, the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. And when it comes to their edits, which I think he gave rise to I don't know if I'm sure academia has named it, but the whole kind of like, it's not gotcha like it's bad, it's wonderful, but the whole, this is what they said, and then, hey, here's 5 clips of them saying something else, right? I wish they had that in debates. I wish you could just, prove that shit to people in real time. I'm sure that's coming when it comes to debates and stuff. But the problem is, though, it gets used a lot now. And I don't know if people can tell some people can, but a lot of people, like if you go on YouTube and watch, whether it's the right or the left, it's like, we went to a Trump rally and we interviewed these people about what they think about this. And obviously they're selectively editing. And there were probably 98% of the footage where people going either, yeah, I don't know, or no, I agree, that's a bad thing about Trump, or that's a bad thing about Biden. But ultimately, they're only going to show you that 2%, 3% where they look like idiots and they prove their point. And I'm not saying Jon Stewart does that necessarily, but it once you see the magician's trick, you're like, I don't know how. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's wonderfully funny, and it's probably true because I think the guy has he takes news seriously, and he takes what he reports on and talks about seriously. But at the same time, you never fucking know. So. But I love that he's back. I love Jon Stewart. I love his mind. I love his intelligence. I have to concede that, of course, like I said, because he's progressive, he's preaching to the choir. What I wonder about is there does the right have a similar figure, as the Europeans say? Does the right have somebody who is, that the people would look at and say, well, yeah, they're undeniably smart and savvy and read up on this. I happen to disagree with a lot of their shit, but they're kind of the right's Jon Stewart, not in terms of fame or influence, but in terms of just intellect and being read in on so many of the of the nations and the world's challenges.
People are not going to like my answer to this, but I think of Tucker Carlson or someone like that on the right, personally.
But you think he's equally impressive as Jon Stewart in terms of his knowledge and analytical mind? Yeah,
I think that I've been watching a lot of Tucker Carlson's like independent stuff. He's taken this real populist turn. Actually, Jon Stewart and Tucker Carlson have this shared history because there's this iconic episode of Crossfire. You know that what I'm talking about. Right. So for people that don't know, Crossfire used to be the show on CNN where it'd be like, we represent both sides. And then we have these arguments, and Jon Stewart went on there and basically got the show canceled. I mean, that's literally what happened.
Old school canceled, not canceled like today's canceled.
Right. Like old school, like the show is no longer on the air. And Crossfire, I think, was on since the 80s. And so Tucker Carlson, the thing with Tucker is he's much more controversial. But I also, when I listen to him, I'm like, it's interesting. I'd like to know more about what specifically about this people have a problem with, like whatever he was saying at any given time, because it sounds pretty cogent and it's certainly working. Like him leaving Fox was probably the best thing that ever happened to him, I would imagine.
It was smart.
And well, they kind of got rid of him, you know.
No, I know, but I'm saying not that it was his choice, but I mean the independent angle is so smart now. If you already have that platform, look at you and Kind of Funny or something like that. You know what I mean? Like there was no reason not to. That wasn't going to benefit him.
Yeah,
that kind of the way it worked out.
Yeah, Gene's by the way going to the bathroom, just in case.
Oh, okay, no problem.
I like how he types that in the private chat, and then Colin's just letting everybody know. Gene's gonna go drop a news, bitches.
Well, I'm more letting.
I don't care. I don't care.
He doesn't want to interrupt the conversation, but then people are going to think he's leaving for no reason. So I'm just letting him know. Who cares? Everyone pees. Everyone poops.
No, it's
no. So you don't think he's got an issue with that? Okay.
No.
Do you guys think Tucker Carlson is a match for Stewart though, in terms of wit, charisma,
no,
likability?
No. I don't think that
at all. I
like
like posing this question because you know what, the arch nemesis, right? The classic Jon Stewart arch nemesis and Bill O'Reilly always seemed like a weird fit for me. It wasn't one for one. You know what I mean? He needs that. I do think it would be cool for the right to have that, like a proper match for Jon Stewart. And they really don't.
Well, you know who else comes to mind for me? I mean, this is, and you were saying it's not about who's big and who's not, although he's pretty big. He's been at Fox since I was in college and I used to watch a show called Red Eye, but Greg Gutfeld is probably maybe some sort of, he does a show called The Five now on Fox, which I watch on YouTube because I don't watch Fox linearly because I don't want to listen to commercials, but otherwise I don't really watch anything on Fox anymore, especially with Tucker gone. But he used to do a show when I was in college called Red Eye, which was like their late night show. And I think he still does a late night show for Fox News. And his late night show actually started trafficking higher than the terrestrial cable channel late night shows, which are fucking horrible universally now. Just awful shit.
He was in the news recently. He said something controversial, but I don't remember what it was, but I remember being very off put by it. But I have to concede that, if I already believed what he was selling or I was already buying what he was selling, maybe I would love the guy. So I mean, he's a very effective
he's
mouthpiece.
Yeah. He's funny. And I guess that would, in talking it through, that's probably a better selection than Tucker Carlson because they do kind of have more of a similar disposition. If you consider, welcome back, Gene. If you consider, these two characters that we're talking about as opposed to Tucker Carlson, who I think is a little more divisive, but I brought him up specifically because it came to mind for me as like, someone who you go in knowing that there's a deep seated bias, as long as you understand that he's not going to make your case for you and that you can't really trust everything. I feel this way about almost every commentator, to be honest. And this is what Jaffe was talking about. Then you're going to get one really lucid side of the argument. And I think that's what you kind of get from Jon Stewart. It was interesting for me to hear you in some way to describe him as someone who kind of calls balls and strikes, because I don't see him like that at all. I think he's much more like that now. And I actually think it began 2 years ago or so, maybe not even, when he was on Colbert. And he said like, oh, by the way, COVID clearly started in a lab in China, basically. And Colbert thought it was, I don't know if you guys remember this clip, but Colbert kind of thought it was like a bit. Yeah. And he's like, I'm not fucking kidding. And that was the first time where I was like, Jon Stewart seems more fair-minded than he ever came off, because I think one thing that's really important, and who made this point recently? Oh, it was Charlemagne the God, when he was interviewed by, I don't know, one of the Sunday shows. And he was saying like, Republicans have been made to be demons for so long that now that you feel like you have a real threat in front of you, like none of us really care, because John McCain was evil and a Nazi, and Mitt Romney was evil and a Nazi, and Bob Dole was evil and a Nazi. And I feel like Jon Stewart is one of the great contributors, not to Bob Dole, because that was before his time on Daily Show, but to the other things, certainly. And while he was right about the Republicans' neoconservatism early in the 2000s, he also was deeply involved in normalizing a lot of weird shit about Barack Obama and their foreign policy and all the different things by just putting a little smug, like, oh, don't you know that? And just a little laugh and a little this and a little that. You can package it up. And it's been brought to like the fore really with Last Week Tonight from his protege, but which is a good show sometimes, but like it's deeply biased. And again, that comes with the territory. So it's interesting to see him come back, because it feels like someone coming off the bench from a different time, because it is from a different time. And it's interesting. I saw his first monologue about Trump and Biden, and watching people get upset about it. And I'm like, that's interesting, because it seemed one of the most fair things I've ever heard him say. And if this is going to be the Jon Stewart that we get now, then okay, maybe he does call balls and strikes. But I do not in the lens of history look at him as someone like that at all. I looked at him as deeply partisan. And
yes,
it's interesting because I was in high school when the Daily Show launched, and you guys remember Craig Kilborn was the host originally, and I loved that version of the Daily Show. It was silly and stupid. It's kind of the difference between Talk Soup and The Soup, where the shows are kind of the same, but they're kind of different. And when
much less political,
right?
Very
oh yeah, totally. It was like
culture.
the moment of Zen and all these weird. It was just so, and they took some of that stuff onto the new show. But he left and he went to do his CBS late night show, and I think he's deeply funny. I think that it's one of those interesting examples of something fundamentally changing very early on, and us not remembering that it actually kind of existed in a different format. So I'm always fascinated by that too. And just a parting shout out, not that it means anything. My best friend growing up, Mike, his parents, the Popes, were obsessed with the Daily Show, and I'll always think of them. When I think of that, they had remember the book that he released that was like a textbook?
Truthness or something.
Yeah,
I
it was like
remember that.
Yeah.
And I remember they got that for Christmas and they were so excited and all the rest. So like I always think of them, they're great. But they loved, that was like a ritual for them, was to watch the show every evening. So I think of that too, and they're big like progressive liberals, you know.
Right.
So I don't know.
Look,
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish up.
Well, no, I was just going to say. I just feel like something. He feels subversive, but it's deceptive. I think I need to see more of this honest portrayal, like the way he honestly portrayed Joe Biden, which is what we all know about Joe Biden, which is that he's senile, right, and not there. It was a step too far for a lot of people, and I want to see his courage. You know, are you going to continue to lean into it, or have you been scared off? I think we know Jon Stewart probably well enough to know that he's not going to be scared off, but
no. I
wonder what that's going to do to the audience. And it is interesting to see him back in the chair, because I personally think Trevor Noah was a horrible replacement, and quickly, like I used to catch it, you know, every once in a while and I'd be like, this sucks.
A lot of people didn't like
this. Isn't funny at all. You're not funny, you know? And I know it's weird, but it's true. And this is kind of this is a problem with Last Week Tonight as well in some sense, but it's really the same problem. It's like, I'm not crazy about foreign people kicking us in the balls all the time on our TV networks. It's like, why is your like viewpoint so valid to us? Like, it's just strange. It's like a person just coming into your house and being like, oh, you guys are fucking clowns, huh?
You're talking about Trevor Noah?
Yeah. And John Oliver, you know, where
well,
like
you
that,
know, I like to believe in something called the free market, which is if the audience doesn't want them, they'd be off the air.
Well, no, but it's the same. But it's the same with me. What's the guy? Why can't I think of the guy that used to be on The Apprentice? He's the older British guy who's an interviewer, and he did a show.
Piers Morgan,
right?
Not Piers Anthony.
And he's gone back to England, and now he's doing that stuff. It's like, yeah, that's where you kind of.
His show was just canceled. I saw, but anyway,
really? Yeah, it's like I wasn't crazy about him being on the air either, and just being like, oh, I'm going to talk about you like I know your country and you guys better than you know yourselves. It's like, bye. So that's like a problem for me.
I'm just saying, though, that people seem to like it because they stayed on the air, right? I mean,
yeah, definitely. I think that the metrics of success change rapidly. I think Trevor Noah would have been easily canceled 20 years ago, but I think that things have changed, you know.
What's interesting to me is when you talk about Jon Stewart kind of coming back from an older generation, you know, you did have this gap. He was in the public eye, of course, with the 9/11 stuff and a few other things, but Bill Maher has done it in real time. And I don't mean that like calling out the show, but you've literally seen it happen, you know, without a break. Like there was some, you know, it was like a slow, but not too slow morphing into, I don't know what you would call him now. A lot of the left kind of got a distaste in their mouth for him because he started, you know, taking some more centrist and semi to the right of center views on his show. And you could see, you know, his frustration that they didn't come along with him. I don't know if he's gotten his footing back. I still watch his show. I still like him. But he's a guy who seems to be more moving a little center from the left as well. I don't know if you watch him or
I do. I watch him almost every week. It's funny because when he's on, it's funny because I've even seen him live and he's really funny too. And I don't agree with a lot of what he says or a lot of what he feels, but he seems fair to me. Like,
Yeah.
I think his whole argument is that I'm not right wing at all. You guys have changed, not me. And I think that's a poignant argument. I personally think that that's true. I think Tucker Carlson recently said it's like, we want to go back to the United States of 1993. And I'm like, that's so interesting, because it's like, when you think about that, it's like, yeah, I kind of understand what you mean. Like, it wasn't that long ago that things were just normal, you know?
Yeah, when Rodney King was getting the shit beaten out of him. Yeah, I remember that.
Well, a lot of bad things happen.
It's easy to be a straight white cis guy who has all this money, and you can shake your head, but it's true. The idea of it's easy to want to go back to a time when things were better for you and ignore one of the reasons we're in a lot of shit right now is that change is chaotic and revolution is hopefully just metaphorically bloody, usually just metaphorically bloody. And, you know, no one gives up power. So of course you want to go back to 1993, Tucker Carlson. I'd like to go back to the 80s, but I don't think my brother who's gay would. You know, I think I understand his point. Like, we're raising kids now in this, they're adults now, but in this climate. And it's like, yeah, our generation had such a better childhood. I don't mean from nostalgia. I just mean it was a kinder, gentler time. If you were, you know, living in my neighborhood and you were white. Now, my son who's trans, maybe not so much for him. I don't know. So I don't know. I push back on those things a little bit because, you know, is it really a white guy's place, a straight white cis guy who has a lot of money's place to be saying this is what we want, is a return to when things were worse for everybody but us?
I just decline that straight out, just because I think that nothing's been better for me than it is right now, to be honest. So,
well, I'm talking about Tucker Carlson. I'm not saying
he's talking about you.
Yeah. Okay. But I would also say that was the case for him. You know, he's mega rich and all. I think what he's saying is like the more I was a child during that era and into my teens, and I think I understand the main line of what he's saying.
Tell me, what do you think he wants that was in 93 that he doesn't have now?
I think it's a sense of like there's less craziness. You know, remember 1993 is Bill Clinton. So I think he uses that year kind of intentionally, because he's not really
him. But he created the craziness. His network created the craziness. All these fucking cable networks created the craziness. 24/7 News created it. He's rich and famous now because of the craziness that he helped bring. The reason we're all so mad at each other is because we're all fucking told different things from different sources. We don't know who to trust. And people make millions and billions of dollars off of it. And for him to say, I want to, you know, let's go back when things were simpler. Fuck off. You can't have it both ways. I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, you're not. It's fine. It's totally fine. That's what this show is. I think you're kind of encapsulating that the reactionary standpoint, whether you agree with it or not, which is the argument that it's like, well, we didn't start the fire. You know, like that's kind of the entire like notion is like we're reacting to the insanity. We're not making it.
That's horseshit. And that's horseshit.
I don't think that is frankly horseshit.
We do it. Come on. Did Tucker Carlson fuck Monica Lewinsky? No. Did Tucker Carlson work for a network along with CNN, along with all these other networks, along with all certain media? Did they work for networks and take paychecks from networks that took that story that wasn't a non-story, but it clearly was making them a lot more money than necessarily covering whatever policies Clinton was digging into? People can talk more about the dress and the come on the dress than they can Janet Reno and Waco. And it wasn't like Janet Reno and Waco wasn't covered all that much. That was in the news too. But I'm just saying that to say we didn't start the fire, it's like, no, okay, maybe you didn't start the fire, but you made it a hell of a lot worse than it would have been if you would have just reported the news. And I know that's not their job. They're not in the business of reporting the news. But I wish our government, as much as I'm a free speech absolutionist, it would be nice if the government, just like on a pack of cigarettes, says, hey, this is known to cause cancer. It's like these guys call themselves news, but every 30 minutes there needs to be a fucking thing on there that says, just so you know, our definition of news is this, and this ain't it. News is what we have given the airline or the airwaves have, we have said to the networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, whatever, you have to give the public an hour a day of public service. That's what we can call news. This is product. And it's always been product, but I think it's where, I mean, Gene could speak to this more than I could, but it feels like for him to say we didn't start, I know he didn't say it literally, but just to imply he didn't start the fire, not Gene, but Tucker. Come on. I mean, it's like, I didn't kill the guy, but after he was dead, I figured, fuck it, everybody else was shooting everybody. I'd pick up a gun too.
That's reactionary politics. I mean, it's just
when but can't we push back on that? I mean, totally. I'm just saying for us.
Yeah, I think you can, but I don't know. Gene, I haven't heard from you yet. Let's get you involved, and then we can expand this conversation.
Yeah, I have a million things to say. And it's funny because this is actually ties into my own topic. I was really happy to hear that Dagan was going first, because that's actually a good segue into my topic too.
Perfect. So we'll do that. Yeah.
Well, about social justice messaging, right? What I think, jumping off the most recent conversation point about Tucker Carlson and what he wants to do in going back to 1993, how I interpret that is, and how I interpret what Colin is saying is about the craziness, is that in 1993 we weren't talking about all these social issues all the time, and it wasn't dominating the headline, and it wasn't like creating policies. We weren't creating company policies on it. There weren't quote unquote DEI policies like in companies happening all the time, and we weren't talking about trans people, and we weren't talking about racial inequality all the time. We didn't talk about it because Rodney King got the shit beat out of him, and then we rioted because that was the only conversation that people at the time felt like they could have.
Well, we didn't riot. Los Angeles rioted. Well, I mean, it wasn't like the country cared.
LA rioted because that's how they felt, because it was all bottled up because of all the treatment that LAPD was giving to black folks at the time, right? But we didn't really talk about it. There was no real national conversation about stuff like that because because social media didn't fucking exist. There was no way to have a national conversation about the LA riots, because all we were doing was watching it on CNN at the time, and then we would turn it off, and then we'll go about our days, and then we would just think about other shit, So again, it kind of feeds back again to what you were saying, Jaffe, about the 24-hour news networks and why Tucker Carlson was kind of part of that machine. I also get that he was also part of that machine. I also understand that Jon Stewart was also part of that machine too.
Of course.
And I think that's what you were saying earlier too, and that's what Colin was saying too. I also blame Stewart exactly for the kind of information economy that we have here. You made a very cogent point about their tactic of editing certain things, right? Now we just do that all the time on Twitter. Look at what happens to Colin in the video game space.
Oh, yeah.
They'll pull shit out and then leave it out of context and put it on Twitter, and then all of a sudden Colin's words are something else, right?
Yeah.
It really started back then. So, I mean, it kind of feeds back to like what I'm thinking about when I think about social justice, racial equity is a great thing, right? I think we, all four of us can agree that that's something we want, gender equity, blah blah blah. That's something we all want, right? That's social justice. And
it's the four of us, sure.
The four of us, right? Let's remove like the racists who see black people on the beach.
Yeah. If we're saying all four of us, I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there is a reaction to like social justice messaging, right? And so I'm wondering, it makes me wonder about like how far we can push stuff like that, and how far we are as a country in a national conversation to have stuff like this, because when you think about it, we haven't been having national conversations about stuff for very long. Because again, we didn't have.
What does that look like? What is a national conversation? I mean, who would lead it? Who would attend? It can't be Twitter.
Well, yeah, right? I mean, like that's what Obama was trying to do. Whenever people try to get on his case about like his past associations with whatever, and then he would go on a podium and then he would like have this professor or lecture. Remember those fucking lectures that we used to get?
Sure. And if you liked the professor like I did, it was great. If you hated him like a lot of people did, it was a nightmare for a lot of people.
Well, I think they were pretty nuanced conversations though, from my take, right? But I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. There's so many different, but that's just what I'm just kind of dumping what's been going through my brain as you guys have been kind of going back and forth on each other.
Go ahead. No.
Oh, yeah. What you have?
No, I don't want to. I'm sorry. I just get excited, and I didn't want to interrupt you. So go ahead, Gene. I'm sorry.
I don't even know where I'm going with this, honestly.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay.
Johnny.
Well, I mean, so I understand what you're saying about the way the messaging has been delivered. I think what's difficult for me as a guy who grew up in very conservative Birmingham, Alabama, as a liberal guy, gay brother, some black friends, which again, it wasn't like blacks weren't allowed in Birmingham, but
was your brother out as a child?
No,
okay.
Not until he was like in college.
Okay.
But it was clear he was struggling with stuff and dealing with stuff. It wasn't like we had segregation in Birmingham at the time, thank God. But, you still had the bad side of town, like, downtown where most black people lived. And then you had the suburbs where most white people lived, and I, even though I'm not Jewish, I was raised Jewish, and that Jews aren't a big part of Birmingham. Where do Jews hang out? See that tree? That wasn't my joke. I think that was Rob Williams. That's a great joke.
It is. It is a funny.
That's
joke.
what I do. That's what I do miss is the comedians that are able to, Anyway, point being though,
he is missed.
That it's hard for me though, having seen the cruelty and unfairness visited upon a number of those minority types, to feel okay having an opinion about when is enough. Like you as an Asian American, I respect that position more because you're living the experience and you lived recently, whatever it means. Maybe you had no experience with it, but that whole Asian hate thing that was going on around 2020 to 2022, right?
My take is that it wasn't real, but whatever.
Okay, right. Fair enough. Totally right. But what I'm saying is,
you're not going to hear any Asian fucking say that. But my take was that it was.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, I don't think as a
you and David show.
I would say as a white guy, although some people say you're not white, you're white presenting because you have Jewish blood. Whatever. As a white presenting guy, whatever the fuck I am.
I mean, Jewish guys are considered white now at this point. So
I don't feel comfortable saying to a black guy, oh, crime's not that bad. If you just do what the police say, you'll be okay. Right. I mean, I literally saw a video today of a woman who it took like 10 minutes to get her arrested because she wouldn't back up her car on a one-way street.
Oh, yeah. I started watching.
And they gave her every single fucking chance. If it was a black guy, good and well, that guy would be pulled out of that car, maybe not even alive. So, but maybe that's not true. Maybe those are isolated incidents that reflect cell phone use increase and blah, blah, blah. But I'm not the guy to offer a valid opinion, not because I'm like, I don't feel it's my place. I don't mean that. I mean, I don't have that lived experience. So who am I to tell a trans black woman or a gay man or an Asian American or a Muslim that their experience that they're talking about in America in 2024, hey, sounds probable to me, but I don't fucking know. I don't feel good banging the DEI drum is too much when I've never had a problem in my life with my skin color keeping me away from a job.
Here's how I interpret, again, like the 1993, the I Wish America Was, right? Is that I wish we didn't talk about this shit. That is basically what I when I hear.
You think that's what Tucker is saying?
I think that's what Tucker is saying because we weren't debating about they them. I'll just read straight up. We weren't saying they them pronouns in 1983. We just straight up weren't, right. We weren't having that conversation.
Or in 2003.
Or 2003 even. Or even 2013. Sure. To be
Why do you think that is though?
Huh?
Why?
Well, because identity politics might progress or whatever, like definite words and definition change. I don't want to debate on whether I think that's valid or not. What I'm saying though, my point is that as a guy who grew up in 1993 and who did not hear the shit and who is getting older and who is kind of, I can sympathize with people who are kind of set in their ways. And it's like, like I'm trying to put on the hat of someone who is like Tucker Carlson or someone who thinks like that, right? And when I put on the hat, I'm thinking, you know what? I'm fucking 42, and I've already figured out life the way it is. Like life wasn't like this. I don't want to introduce new concepts into my brain that I now need to readjust my reality to think about. Like, okay, well now maybe this person can be referred to as a they them.
Okay, but are you saying you as Gene Park are just sort of analyzing that mindset, or are you saying you agree with that mindset?
I'm analyzing that mindset.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah. Because I even see myself as I used to probably think like that, but now I'm more, maybe a little bit more liberal or more progressive, where I'm like, you know what, fuck it, I don't give a shit. Like if people want to redefine things, that's what's going to happen, because that's what happens to words.
But I'm sorry, I have to push back.
People are stuck with definition. It's like definitions of words do change. We learned that in Metal Gear Solid 5 and the Phantom Pain,
I knew you were
that was the entire point of that
game.
is that the definitions of words can change.
Are you in the Lale Lule Lule Lolo?
Cobra La.
Yeah. I have to say though about the whole they them thing. I don't want to get into that either specifically, but I don't think it's how much of it has been piggybacked on by identity politics for people's political and financial gain. Probably a great amount of it. I agree. But I also think a big part of it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of the fact that non-binary folks and trans folks were so far deep in the goddamn closet in 93 and 83 and 2003 that they might as well have been living in the neighbor's house. That's
why. But we didn't have social media. We didn't have internet. We didn't have this national platform for discourse for stuff like that. Which is why social media has been so empowering for so many different groups of people, right? Including gamers, right?
Oh yeah,
let's be real, including gamers.
Yes, and I have to.
Fans,
I got to shut up. I'll keep talking. I can't talk. Go. I'm not. This is happening in real time in my brain. I'm sharing it with you guys. I apologize, but we're just talking. I know, but I don't want to talk over you. You're fucking Gene Park from the fucking wash. I see your T-shirt. I know what you're about. Shut up, Jaffe. All right, go, Gene. I'm sorry.
I forgot what was it saying about what was I talking about?
My tactic worked. Ha. Sorry, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
You were talking about that you get set in your ways in your 40s and you're kind of analyzing life through the Tucker Carlson.
I sympathize with that. I don't see that it's such a far bridge for me to like not understand what Tucker is saying. That's what I'm hearing.
Sure, I think I understand his point of view. I don't agree with it, but I understand.
Yeah, I don't agree with it either. I'm with you there, but
yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with some of it and not. I mean, I take some things and other things don't. Like, I think the social conversation, I think, has been very productive in some ways and very destructive in other ways. Like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, I think that the category, I've said this so many times, but it's just so important to me as foundationally is like, when I was a kid, I was born in 84, so that gives you some context or whatever. I grew up with a bunch of black kids and Hispanic kids and Asian kids. We lived in a very diverse place and no one was really talking about it. Now, I don't know if that's like a repression thing or whatever, or if like, it's being talked about at kitchen tables and with adults and all that kind of stuff, but it seemed somewhat harmonious. Like if we grew up in this situation today, it wouldn't be like this. We would all notice that we were different from each other because we would be forced to notice it. And I think as a young kid, when you're so ignorant about the world, everything's presented to you. Anything could be true. We talk about that all the time. Like we tell children complete lies for years and they believe it, right? So you really do take on the naturalistic environment around you. And for me, when I would have like a black friend over and then the next week I'd have a white friend over, no one around me was like, oh, that's different. You had a black friend and then you had a white friend. It's like, no, just two friends. And it wasn't, as I said, until I got to college, which was very liberal, of course. I can't even imagine going to Northeastern now. It must be a fucking nightmare. In fact, they're part of the whole like cancel brigade, getting people canceled from speaking there and stuff too. It's like, go fuck yourselves, losers. Don't make me embarrassed that I went there. I'll really be mad about that. But it was at that time that I became aware of things, and it was in some ways very productive for me. I brought up in the past that I went to college as a neoconservative, social conservative, not religious, just like marriages between. In my mind anyway, it's like I always really believed in gay marriage as a politically cognizant person, but it's like I can understand at least why you would say marriage is between a man and a woman. So did Barack Obama. So did Joe Biden. So did all these people at that time.
Exactly,
Barack Obama was saying a marriage is between a man and a woman when he was getting reelected.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that long ago. So, but the point is, and I was more devoutly pro-life, and it was through conversation and exposure that I walked out of college against the Iraq War, against the Afghanistan War, pro-choice, vehemently pro-gay marriage, as opposed to just being like, I don't really give a shit, I'm more of a libertarian stance, whatever. So the point is that like some of the social, even if you want to call it engineering in quotes, which I don't think it was just discourse. There were plenty of conservative people too. It worked. And I think it was effective. But I think the major bomb in everything was intersectionality and subdividing everyone into these categories, like half of which I believe don't even exist, to be perfectly honest with you. Like once you get into like the deep gender shit, it's like I don't believe almost any of that exists. And so
be specific. What doesn't exist?
So like demisexual and like a gender, it's like whatever it is. It's like I don't know. Like you see all the different acronyms. It's like I think that at some point none of this is real. But okay, do what whatever you want to do as an adult. But intersecting all of these different things, it's like that's the important thing. Is like once you're an adult, I really couldn't give a fuck less what you do. I mean, to be really honest with you. But I think that in some way, the social engineering through intersectionality has subdivided people so clearly that it's made people self-aware of things about themselves or about their in-groups that they never really realized or that they didn't really have to be associated with, almost like the reverse of integration. And it's like now we have to all be very self-aware. I'm a white man. It's like, I just want to be a person, and I understand that people are like, well, not everyone has the opportunity to just be a person. And I'm like, but I'm arguing that it was more like that when I was young. So this seems regressive, doesn't it? I mean, fundamentally. So that's where I draw the dividing line, where I'm like, some of the progress has been very positive, but I think some of the stuff, especially with gender and race, has been really fucked.
I think you would have to get some black folks or, you have Gene as an Asian guy.
Yeah, a proper cross-section.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You even yourself kick that off by saying when you're young, you'll believe anything. So the lens through which you viewed the world when you were young and everything was equal and simpler and nobody cared.
But doesn't it
I don't know if that was real or if that was your view as a young kid.
That's the equilibrium.
Dagan was what, X years older? Did you see the same experience? Do you have the same experience Colin did?
No, a decade apart, over a decade apart.
No, but in that did you have the same experience with the diverse kids around you and it never even entered your mind to think black kid, Asian kid, white kid, whatever?
Yeah, we were fortunate for it to be really diverse. I don't think it's that we didn't notice. I just think it didn't matter. It really honestly didn't matter because it was so inclusive racially, religiously, socioeconomically, and all that kind of stuff. You know what the thing that I have kids, 2 teenagers, and here's the thing you never hear is that I know there's been a big uptick in all of this discourse, right? But here's the thing you never hear about. How much of it is due to just the increase in social acceptance of all these things,
right?
That teases out and encourages not only the people, but the conversations around these things. I think it's always, obviously, it's what all intelligent people know. It's always existed to some degree, all of these things that are so popular now in culture. But I think that increased social acceptance is what makes it more, is what puts it more,
because there's been trans people. There's been trans people since ancient times, right?
Of
it's
course.
not a new invention of humanity,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I say something real quick?
Here's
my thread. Here's my thread between Stewart, what Stewart said specifically in his monologue, in the monologue after the Biden Trump age thing, right? To what my topic was with social justice and what Colin was talking about with messaging and everything, is that I was really struck by what Stewart said at the end of his piece, where he talked about what it takes to actually politically win, right? And it was something that he learned recently, and he admitted that he felt like it was something that he took for granted or he didn't really see, is that the real work has to happen every day, boots on the ground, knocking on doors, day in and day out. Even if your guy wins, you have to keep working, right? That reminded me of something that because I work for gay marriage in Hawaii, right? So I worked with a lot of activists there, and I worked with a lot of gay activists. Right, these guys are old. These guys are around Jaffe's age, right, or in their 60s. And then when Trump won, I was talking to them, and he was like, I'm looking at all the, and they were telling me,
I like how that wasn't set up or responded to as a joke by any of you three motherfuckers. It was just like, well, yeah, no, Jaffe's old. Let's keep going.
Oh, I'm just listening. I'm sorry.
I hope you all die in your sleep tonight in a fire. Okay, continue, please.
He was saying, all these kids right now, they feel so despondent. You see these people screaming in the streets that Trump won, right? And then, but then he was calm. He was like, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not worried about the future of democracy or anything like that. You know why? Because it just means that we just have to go back to work. It just means that we have to keep working. It just means I just understand something that these kids do not seem to understand or have quite really learned yet, is that you have to keep fighting. You didn't just lose. You have to keep working, Stop thinking of it as a win-win or a lose-lose. And then and what his theory is that back-to-back Barack Obama wins and Obama's messaging with all this hope and change and blah, 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 and diversity and blah, blah, blah. And then the Democratic Party started doing all this. And that's why Hillary Clinton felt so confident that she started with fight song in the convention, and that all this cringy stuff about diversity and all the people coming together, is that like people started to think, we have an entire generation of people who think that these kind of social wins are really, really easy to make, and then to do that, all you have to do is just win an argument online and yell about it, and then you'll convince people, and then you'll win, rather than understanding that real social change is going to happen really, really slow. And it's going to happen at the street level. It's going to happen at the neighborhood level. It's going to happen at the level of what Colin and Dagan were doing, talking to other kids the face-to-face, as opposed to just yelling people online and just trying to blast all these slogans and then make people think that someone in the Midwest is going to start understanding what they them pronouns are already mean, So and I really do blame social media in making people feel like that's the extent of activism. That's why there's a joke where you say, "Oh, I posted one tweet today. That's enough activism for today," right? Because a lot of people don't actually have actually ever done fucking activism before. It's not easy as just saying hashtag Free Palestine and it's going up.
Yeah, but it's a huge thing to unpack though, because even if you take like there's a valid lens to explore what you're saying, through which the young people, it's not just that, oh, they're naive and they're young and they don't know the hard facts of life, although that is obviously a big truth. But there's also, I think, a sense of they also, because of social media and because of being connected all over the world, they've seen how ineffective a lot of the things that are supposed to work, like nonviolent protests, can be. They saw the Arab Spring happen in real time. Mm-hmm. And for about 4 days there, however many days it was, there was a sense of, oh my God, things are changing. And then the boots came in and fucking arrested and killed a bunch of people, and nothing's really ever changed all that much. Mm-hmm. And I think they see that here. It's like we had George Floyd and I Can't Breathe, and we had all that. And then suddenly, you're still seeing the footage of now
we got Biden, and then everyone thinks Biden sucks now too, right?
Yeah, but I'm just saying that I think part of it's a naivete on the part of kids, but I also think part of it is growing up with a camera aimed at the truth of both the bad stuff and that the stuff that we've been sold as good, mm-hmm. like here's how you have to fight the good fight, isn't really all that effective in terms of what is the expectations. It's like, yeah, it's gotten better and that's something, but I think there is a sense of like, it shouldn't have to take that long. It shouldn't have to take that fucking long for a bunch of people to stop being assholes to other people just because they don't understand them. I just think the younger people have a pot to piss in when it comes to their stance. It's not just one based on them being ignorant, although I do agree there's a big part of that.
I wanted to say about this topic is, don't you, Gene, it's interesting. Like not a lot of people, but people bring up my tweets from 6 or 7 years ago about how, mm-hmm. About Asian Americans And it was one of the first things you and I talked about actually when we became friends.
Yeah,
and
I'm annoyed at people who said that I didn't take you out for task. Number one, I was fucking dying of cancer, man. So you know what? Maybe I just didn't feel like having like a heated fight on camera with this guy. You know. Anyways,
but also, that's a good point. But also, and I talked about this on the show.
But
is that
most Asians would have been able to do both, Gene. That's all we're saying. Most Asians could do both.
Asians are overachievers, and we expected more, I guess. But for me, we talked about it and had a lot of nuanced conversation about it, both on the camera and off the camera. And I think we somewhat agreed, which was that, and I could be wrong, but that though what I said was eloquent, which is true, it's not necessarily wrong in the main. I mean, what I was basically saying was that Asian people will either be considered white adjacent or will be attacked for ruining or upending this idea of white supremacy as a systemic issue in the United States. And we've seen that since that happened. I mean, Harvard is being sued deeply and all the affirmative action stuff was undone because of what was happening to Asian students. And I just look at this division and subdivision of people's race and just feel like it's anti.
I do disagree though. I think people can be more racist towards black people than Asian people, you know?
But what does that have to do with what the point though, I guess is what I'm saying, right? Like all I was saying was that there can't be a situation in the United States where white supremacy is the rule of the game when there are all of these exceptions to the rule. It's not a rule anymore. It doesn't mean that black people don't have it worse than Asian people. You know, I never said that. To me, you know,
were you arguing that that's not what I hear when people push back on you. When I say, what in the world could you have against Colin? The guy, you know, you have to agree with everything he says. They don't cite that. They cite sort of a similar thing where you said, you know, it's just a fact that Asian Americans tend to do better at, that's the thing that they cite. I didn't. So when
that's the whole modern what is it called? The model minority myth or whatever people say that is. That's not my intention. And I also just don't really agree with that. It's simply saying, like, because people are like, well, that doesn't mean that there aren't poor Asians or whatever. And I'm like, do you understand averages? Like, I don't understand how you get any of that out of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in a culture,
they're not all going to land, Colin. They're not all going to land.
In a culture where so many successful minorities of all races and stripes or whatever are doing well, you simply can't have this overarching rule that whites have it the best. I just don't believe that.
I think it's about the definition of white supremacy, which is the academic definition, which is, I think, this is something that Chris brings up a lot. Chris would have been actually a great person in the conversation too, come to think of it. But this is something that Chris talks about. The academic definition of white supremacy is that all people who are white are racist unless you are actively working against dismantling racism. Then you are born a racist because you benefit from what is natively a white supremacist system that was built by white people to suppress.
And I believe that as well. I think that's absolutely true. But I
believe that there are still systemic elements of white supremacy in certain elements of society. For example, bank loans, for house loans. That they would just be rejected to people who are might be a darker skin color. And if they're rejected because of their poverty level, then maybe because they grew up in a black neighborhood, and then all of those different factors start tumbling in. So I think that's what people start talking about when they think about America being a white supremacy system, right? So
I think the problem is, though, you've framed it in the proper nuanced way. Mm-hmm. So people will come to me and they'll attack me for going, Jaffe says all white people in America are racist. And I'm like, yeah, based on the definition that Gene just gave. Yeah. It's a nuanced definition, and it's meant to invite a reflection of systemic aspects of our society that may or may not, depending on your view, still be at play. But most people, because they don't really, and I don't mean they're idiots, they're busy. They're trying to fucking survive a capitalist system that doesn't give a fuck about them unless they're making some fucking ducats for people, right? So I understand that not everybody has the time or interest to do this research or reading, but to them, they hear me saying, oh, that means you must be like all the bad guys except the dentist in Django Unchained. It's like, you must be a racist like that. It's like, that's not what I'm saying, but because we have very different views on it.
Yeah.
And that's a really unfortunate thing. And that I do think social media and our shitty schools, public schools in a lot of ways have created a real problem. I don't think I love social media, obviously, but my God, the lack of interest and nuance. Have you ever seen those tweets where somebody writes more than like 3 lines and people, I ain't reading all that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Really?
Well,
really?
I mean, it's a little tough too, because like when I explained that definition of racism to my friends who did not go to college, and I think that's the difference. I have a lot of friends who never went to fucking college. They are by society standards dumbasses, right? So when I explained to them, they're like, I never heard that definition of racism before. And then what am I going to do? Call them racist because they never learned that shit, you know? So so that's why like it's weird to have people try to have that same understanding and apply it to other people, you know? Yeah. So that's why, that's kind of what you were talking about, Jaffe, is that when I approach it, I'm trying to explain it with a certain nuance in a way where I'm just not saying, hey, Dagan, I think you're racist. You're
Archie Bunker, you know, that's no one saying that.
Like I'm certainly not saying that. I don't think that's what they're suggesting, but then they're also fucking saying it though. And they're saying with the vitriol of, hey, I think you're fucking racist. This is white supremacist or whatever.
That is a full-blown racist too. So
sure. Yeah. That shit, though, I agree with when you originally said about the messaging of it, right?
Yeah,
it's like I understand the people that are in the trenches and being attacked don't have time for the fucking nuance, but the allies of those people like myself, for example, we do have the bandwidth to kind of explain it, whether people want to hear it or not, or whether we actually are right or not is a different issue. I'm not saying just because I'm taking the time to explain anything, I'm right.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to put that burden on people that are getting the shit kicked out of them metaphorically and literally to go, no, let me explain the nuance of what was that teaching they were trying to do, CRT, critical race theory?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you know, there's a whole history to that. Nobody's really teaching that in grammar school or even junior high, but that, you know, nobody wants to really get into the facts of it. What do you think that's about? Why is it just, I mean, I don't blame people because we're busy, we're trying to live, but how do we fix that? The fact that if you can't write it in a headline, maybe that's what AI is going to be good for. It's like, take all of this shit and give it to me in 2 sentences. So
and that was the problem is that a lot of these fucking people finished school and then they learned all this shit and then they all work for BuzzFeed and Vice, which are all closing fucking down anyways. And then they started cramming all of this wonderful shit that they learned in school into these fucking headlines.
Now you're getting into it. Yes,
exactly. And that's what started to contribute to the information economy of madness.
Yes,
that Tucker Carlson is starting to feel like suffocated by. You know.
Do an example or two of that.
Because we have all this information, and we're again, not to bring up Metal Gear Solid 2, but we have this sea of garbage and information and perspective and takes with no proper context into it. You know.
Yeah.
You asked Gene something, Jaffe. What do you want to ask that again?
Well, no, I was like, you know, the idea of a lot of people going to college, then coming out and writing headlines based on sort of much more nuanced things they learned and putting it in a headline.
And then you notice how many of them are white because they feel that pressure because they were told that if they don't fucking do anything about being white, then they're racist.
Yeah.
So I gotta look in the media and I gotta be doing this.
I have never believed
it. Otherwise, I'm racist.
I have never
Otherwise, I'm
believed
a racist. I can't be racist. You know?
Okay, well, I got to push back on that too because I hear you, but it's like this whole, you just say that because you have white guilt is what they'll say. I don't have white guilt. I'm fine being white. I didn't enslave anybody, but do I think?
But that's the problem with a lot of people, Jaffe, is like, I would say the same thing. It's like, I don't have an ounce of guilt about anything. I didn't do anything to anybody. Like,
right, but
I was born, I was just born, you know?
Right. But I can still acknowledge that we have systems in place that were built on the bones of a lot of racist bad ideas. But that doesn't mean that I'm like walking around with guilt. I'm saying it because I'm like, you know what? No, it's a good point.
Yeah, it's
You're
true
right,
that
it's a
there are
good point.
ancestors. I mean, this is what I'm talking about why it's so fucking stupid to have this kind of essentialism where it all boils down to race and ethnicity. This had recently come out with that Sunny, what's her name on The View, where she did, you know, that guy, Henry Gates, I think his name is, he does like he's the black guy and he does like the DNA test and tells people where they're from. I think it's on PBS.
Okay.
She did one of those, I think, with him, and and she's always talking about reparations and this and that. And it's like her family are slave traders. It's like, so you can already tell. And she had like kind of a little bit of a breakdown about it. You know, it's like, you're the problem. Now to me, Dagan and I are white. Our family came over from Ireland in the 1850s, poor as fuck, fought in the Civil War, right? Our Italian side came over in the 1920s, 1930s. We had nothing to do with literally any of the systemic bullshit that happened here.
You know?
And this is the point I'm saying. It's like, my people, even if you want to boil it down, it's like, my people didn't do fucking anything to anyone either. You can't even boil it down to, the Irish were fucking slaves for half of their existence. They were the British Isles were being raided for hundreds of years. Like, we have our own problems, but I don't even care about that. That has nothing to do with me. I'm here now. I was born in 1984. My parents didn't do anything to anyone either, by the way. And I don't carry along this. This is where I get nervous about this conversation, because I see this rising, and I definitely do. And I wonder if Gene agrees, which is like, there's a movement kind of in conservatism, not like because people would call it white supremacy or whatever. And it's like, it's totally antithetical to everything I believe anyway. But you see people being like, well, if you're going to boil us down, then I guess we have to be an in-group. You know, it's like, if you want to talk about blacks this and Indians this and so on and so forth, then I guess we have to look at ourselves as whites and watch out for our own self-interest. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, fuck, this is horrible. This is horrible.
That's
like
horrible,
seeing this,
yeah.
like this is steps backwards. We're resegregating ourselves and recategorizing ourselves, when I think the key and what makes America truly unique is not that it's a melting pot, which is one of the components of what makes it unique, but it's a melting pot where everyone becomes American, and where you come from and who you are or were no longer really matters or is relevant, to the point where, as generations passed, it has no bearing on you anymore at all. Timothy Moriarty, that came over here in the 1850s, and me have nothing in common except for certain strands of our DNA. And I pay the price for I don't carry the sins of any generation or any group of people. I carry my own burdens and my own sins and my own choices. And I choose to lead my life in as virtuous and in as fair a way as possible. I try to put out into the world what I want back, which is, but like,
you're applying a very personal, again, I keep using the phrase lens. I don't mean to repeat myself, but you're applying a very personal lens through which you view it to a situation that isn't individual based, right? So it's like, yes, of course, the Moriartys did nothing wrong. Okay. But pardon me for not caring about your struggle of feeling a little put down upon because you're white or I'm white presenting, when how many black people didn't do anything wrong, but they were picked up, put on a boat, sold, brought, I mean, there's a lot of people.
So, right, but isn't
I know what I'm saying. There's a lot of people that are ahead of you in line at a huge number.
Right, Jaffe.
That are using that same argument. And instead of just going, it's kind of like when there's a school shooting and a lot of the right says, this is not the time to be political about it. And it's like, yeah, but at some point, when do those people get their sense of restitution, or their sense of, okay, we can exhale now because at least the racism that we perceive, or the homophobia that we perceive, or the Asian hate that we perceive, or whatever, that isn't a meaningful part of my life. So now I can feel like going back to 93 makes sense. But they don't want to go, that's all I'm saying is I get what you're saying, and it's easy to hear what you're saying if you're listening to this podcast right now and you're like, yeah, fuck it, I feel that way. Yeah, of course you feel that way. But that's a personal way to feel, but you can't apply that to the problem as some sort of balm, because the problem is there's so many other people that have not gotten their time to push
right,
back.
but
like
isn't
that.
the only
It's a pecking
restitution to change the reality by treating people differently? I mean, that's the whole point I'm making is like, if we consider ourselves like a 7 billion person unit, or even in the United States, like 330 million unit, and I'm one molecule, it's like, well, I'm pulling my weight. Like, I'm trying to make change. I'm treating everyone like, I'm sure that my ancestors were racist, like, no doubt about it, like but even if they didn't participate in the systemic slave trade and all that kind of things, or had slaves or whatever, I'm sure that it wasn't great for them either. That's the point, is like, Dagan and I, as just Moriarty's, and this is an example, like you said, a personal example. It's just like, well, if we kind of pull our part of the rope and everyone kind of pulls forward, isn't that restitution? Which is to say, like, let's incorporate the downtrodden and let's treat everyone equally, regardless of who they are.
For the Moriarty boys, yes, of course, it's fine. But if you're talking about everybody else, Colin.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, this is why I think this, and you guys might disagree, but as I read it, this is why I think that affirmative action was dismantled ultimately, because I'm one of the people that, and I don't know if you guys agree one way or the other, but I actually think affirmative action was necessary, like very much necessary. But the idea was not to forever have some sort of quota system, but to break the barrier down once and for all, so that so that people can be treated fairly in a fair-minded way, no matter what. Like, so that they would be drawn from, not that it would be like like a reverse racist thing where you start having these quota systems and everything. That's what I'm saying, is everything is totally breaking down, where like things start well enough.
In that legislation was it written that these are going to be the markers to say we have achieved that goal and now we can pull this program back? Because I think that's the issue people have that are still in support of it, which is like, nobody wants to be given a job over someone else who may or may not be a little less or more qualified because of the color of their skin or any other reason. But ultimately, that's the world we're in right now. Are you saying that world is over and that's why it's been dismantled?
Yeah, I think, and again, I know you say I speak from a place of privilege, so I appreciate and respect that.
As do I.
But yeah, I think that if you look around the world in 2024, it is a very different world than it was in the 1970s, and that we don't really need those levers anymore. Yeah, I believe that. I think it should be, and it is. I mean, it's no longer, it is illegal. Like, that's what's so interesting about this. And I think why Harvard and other institutions have been sued and pursued or whatever, because it is illegal they are basically biased against whites in a lot of different ways, and Asians. And it was the Asians and Indians. A lot of people don't know a lot of these interesting statistics. Like, the most per capita educated group in the United States are Nigerian Americans, right? The highest earning Americans are Indian Americans and Asian Americans, right? There's so much nuance to it about what, and people. What'd you say? What'd you say, Jim?
I wish I could be one of them, but yeah.
That's the point, is that people say, like, well,
this is railroad, Gene.
This is
Jesus Christ, my Amtrak train was.
Yeah, wrong. That's still racist.
It's all the same. I know it's racist. That's why I said it.
I know. I'm joking.
I know you're joking, but I have to be very clear for the audience.
I do understand and appreciate that. I
know you do.
But I feel like people just don't. That's where the model minority myth thing is just so strange to me, because I'm like, no one's saying that there aren't downtrodden, or like there's downtrodden people everywhere. This is going to get into my topic about in a little while, but I just feel like I'm concerned, because I want, and I say this as a white person, so again, people can take it as they want, but it's like, I want to get to a point where we don't even, it's totally irrelevant. Like, maybe you notice or you care, but it's irrelevant. Now, what I believe about this personally, and I believe this truly with race, I think it's probably a little less true with gender and gay people, unfortunately, which I think still have a ways to go. But I think with race, like, my personal opinion is not only the average American, a vast majority of Americans are not racist. Like, I do believe that. I think you can say like a vast majority.
Define racist first, though. Based on like what Gene was saying.
Yeah, sure. That's fair. I don't think they go around with an active or even a passive disposition that they are better than other people because they're white or they're Asian or they're Indian or whatever. I think that that's true. I think that's
probably true.
And I think that yeah, good.
Well, I was going to say, does your definition take into account that you can have both of those things working for you, but you can also still at some level treat people, and it may just be biological, it may be an evolutionary thing, but someone who is so visually clearly different from you, there is some kind of bias at play there. I think that you can also admit that can exist without you being consciously or passively racist.
Sure, but I would also argue, if anything, that it's gone in the other direction.
Right, that you try too much to over.
Right, I think that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with affirmative action. I remember talking to my friend Charles back in the day, who was black. Well, he wasn't black. He is black. But it's important to the story is that, like, we were talking, and he was talking about getting jobs or whatever. We were in college, and I was like, we were talking about affirmative action, and I'm like, what is it? How do you feel as a black individual, like, where you don't really know the chemistry, like the equation of how you got the job? Was it totally based on merit? Did they like want to say like, oh, we need the equation says we need a black person now, and this guy kind of fits the bill and all that kind of stuff? I wouldn't want to be in that position personally, and that's why I've.
But you are in that position. We're all in that position.
No, no. I don't agree at all. In the sense that with my own company,
it doesn't matter if you agree.
I can honestly say again with my own actions that people were not hired for any other reason than their merit. There's nothing for them to question, and consciously, I've made a substantially more diverse group of podcasters than almost any of my competitors. Who
what I'm saying though is
to do that.
I'm talking about you being hired somewhere else. I'm saying that we all benefit from things that we're not even aware of we're benefiting from.
That's true, but that's why I believe.
Forget the racist part. You may have been hired by an HR woman who just liked tall dudes who come from the old country. You don't know, right? I mean, I'm not trying to splinter the conversation, but the idea that a lot of things work in and against our favor, whether you're of the top 1% or not, that you don't really ever fucking know why people make those decisions. But you have to know that there are a lot of unconscious bias shit at work, right? I mean,
sure, but I would say that that's washing out though. I just believe that. Like, I just believe that that's
okay.
And that's why I think that like and this is just my opinion, but a disposition towards egalitarianism. In other words, and this is why I was saying about a child, about easily malleable, but they absorb the easiest. It's like Occam's razor. Like the most obvious thing to them is what's going to be true, even if it's not. And what was most obvious to me, based on the way I was treated, integrated into different groups of children at nursery school and kindergarten and elementary school, was like no one was. It just wasn't coming up. So I was like, oh, I guess this is just the way it is. And I think that that's good. That's fucking good. They didn't over-engineer the situation at all. And maybe
so if you had three people in this panel or two others that are in this panel that weren't us, and they were black, there was a black lady and a Middle Eastern trans dude, whatever, just all over the spectrum. And they were saying, yeah, but our childhoods in America were vastly different. What would you say to those kids? Would you say, or to those adults?
I would say
they have a valid view that they need to get some kind of way to live where they feel better?
Sure. I would say that in my opinion, so let's assume those people have children, is to say, ensure that your children grew up the way I did. You know, like not in terms of whatever, but in terms of disposition. If you want to change the reality, then do what our parents did to us. Our parents are decidedly not racist. Like
you said your parents were very progressive, I think, correct?
Yeah. My dad's more like a moderate conservative, but they're both liberal minded environmentalists. They were hippies in the hippie era. And so I think that they understand, their outlook, I think it was very positive, which is like, there's really no difference between us at all. So
I don't think any of us are smart enough to have this conversation really. And I mean, maybe even humans, because even that, whatever put your parents on the road to end up being hippies, and thus to pass that on to you, and ultimately for you guys to pass that on to your children, they weren't necessarily responsible for a lot of that. It was sort of luck of the draw that they found themselves in situations where their ideologies became that, or they were able to take in enough Christianity to still be devout Catholics, as it sounds like they are, at least your dad is, and at the same time also bring in more of the hey, I'm Jesus washing feet part of the religion from the Super Bowl that I learned.
That was so weird. That was so weird.
But I'm just saying that it's like, and I'm not saying this to sort of go, see, it's not worth discussing. It's very much worth discussing. But it's like when I hear all of us talking about this, whether you're talking about our inability to track social media, or you're talking about why can't it be this way? This is how I was raised. There's so many factors that are at play that we just can't track. You'd need like a super fucking human AI to be able to go, this is what's really happening, right? Because we're the result of our experiences, and to claim that we can re-engineer that for someone else, I wonder about the validity of that claim, and does it really get us anywhere?
Well, this is where I think we're at an impasse, in the sense that, and I feel this way about a lot of things. It's like, as an individual, it's not even American or anything. I'm a human, and I'm going to feel about things the way I feel about things, and treat people with a certain level of respect and all of that kind of stuff. But there does come a point, a line, where it's like, you can feel, you yourself are a free person, the royal you out there. You can feel about anything how you want, but that's not going to affect my own output. Like it's like, you can disagree with my philosophies on this, but this is nonetheless the way I feel. Like that I am not responsible for your situation, and I'm only going to be able to do what I can do to help you in small ways, which is to just live a better life. It's very similar to why I put fucking solar panels on my house, because I wanted to do something about making the environment better. That's all I can do, but I did do it for that reason.
You also said that you went into college one way and came out a different way. You also have an open mind.
Yes, I do.
Presented with right. So that's a thing I wish we could get more people to just go, it's okay to be wrong. My topic I'm going to bring up later today, I don't have to be right on it. I mean, I like to be right. It's fun. It feels good. My brain fires the right chemicals when I feel like I'm right. But we can rise above that desire. And there's a bigger thing at play here, which is, just try to bring in whatever truth you can find instead of just being so fucking tribal about it. But anyway, I'm sorry. I don't know. I love the conversation. I love the topic. Usually what it does is that eventually you get to, like you said, an impasse where you go, how do you solve it? There's so many really nuanced, complex factors that play into it.
Well, Colin,
you go ahead, Gene.
I feel like, Colin, a lot of what you think, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that, I think a lot of the problems in society today, you believe can be drilled down to class.
Yes. And that's what's going to be part of my topic. I guess I should just get into my topic then. Is everyone satisfied, by the way? Let's put a pin. Let's go around.
The topic at this point, but yeah.
The fact, that's why I believe that's why I defend you as not being a far right individual, Colin, because the fact that you believe that so much of this drills down to class means that you have a lot more in common with the far left than you do with anyone else.
Yes.
Well, and I'm not even talking about like liberals. I'm not talking about fucking Biden and Kamala, like far left. Because the actual leftists and socialists, they don't give a shit about identity politics either. They really don't.
Yeah, they like the Chapo. I don't listen to that stuff, but I know that those guys like hate this shit. Yeah,
and they make fun of it.
And it should be. And I do think it's worthy of derision, in my opinion, in the extremes, because I think it's been regressive and destructive. Like it's totally distracting. And that is a major thing I feel too, is that I think a lot of it is intentionally engineered to distract you. To my point earlier, remember when I was talking about like all these people leaving BuzzFeed or leaving college to go to work at BuzzFeed and make all these headlines? It's true. I can guarantee you 1,000% that there were conversations in each of these newsrooms, and they will tell you, hey, identity politics is really, 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 really hitting right now. It's a trend. Let's do more of these articles.
Sure.
And that was a trend. Now it's not. No one fucking cares about those fucking articles anymore. But it was absolutely the trend during the 2014 to 2016 stretch of time until Trump won.
You can see the line that was crossed. That, I think it's funny. Like
those years, right? Those specific years.
But it's certain things too, like Latinx, right? Mm-hmm. That was like a massive nope. Like the whole Zer Zim fake pronoun thing. Like that was nope. The whole there are just certain things where they push too far, and I think there is some sort of rubber band effect now, because you couldn't just stop, right? Like there is no stopping, but that is
the entire Kotaku website.
Right, okay. Exactly. Awful.
No, I saw your clip you guys put out.
Yeah, it's the worst. But I guess this goes into my topic, which is Ukraine and propaganda, but it's going to get into class, because I think that it all boils down to this ultimately. I've been deeply against America's involvement in any way in the Ukraine war since the very beginning, since February of 2022. And I was very vocal about it. I feel like the situation has gone such that it doesn't even need to be recounted, in that I I and many, 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 many other people that are much smarter than me said, like, this is going to turn into a quagmire, and there's going to be a frozen conflict, and so many people are just going to get killed, and we're just prolonging the inevitable by kind of being half in, half out. The reason that I wanted to bring this topic up was because it goes back into my college years. So I was a senior in high school when 9/11 happened. So you can imagine and our dad's a firefighter in New York City. You can imagine this was a pretty radicalizing event. And I adopted a deeply neoconservative foreign policy. Neoconservatism is a hegemony sort of United States has military bases everywhere. It comes from what's called the policy of the new American century, if you want to go read about it. There's a famous paper that was written in the 90s about it. And it all stems from this, like Donald Rumsfeld and all those dudes.
This is the Bush doctrine, right?
Right, exactly. And it was basically that the United States was ultimately going to go into the Middle East and kind of topple these governments. This was before 9/11. And so, which is why why a lot of conspiracy theorists think that 9/11 was allowed to happen as like as a precept in the war.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
I got to tell you, there's someone very prominent in the games industry who I know is a 9/11 truther. I have to tell you guys afterwards. I won't say it. We went to dinner once and he regaled me. So there was this idea that we would get involved, and I was like, yeah, let's, especially after 9/11 when I became aware of PNAC and all the rest. And I was like, yeah, let's go fuck these dudes up. I didn't know anything. I was 16 years old. And as I said, in college, I kind of washed through. I had a pretty conservative education. Actually, a lot of my history professors were old dudes in their 70s and 80s. They were fucking awesome, but they were not liberal. But there was just a lot of liberal happenings. This was when the anti-war protests were going on. Bush was reelected in 2004 when I was in college, and I voted for Bush in 2004. That was my first presidential election. And my first election as an 18-year-old was Mitt Romney as governor in 2002 in Massachusetts when I was a freshman in college.
No shit.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And so you
really were a Romney voter all the way back then.
Yep, I still have my Romney sign actually in my closet from the gubernatorial race, which is funny.
How did he end up in Utah then? I thought he was a Utah guy through and through.
No, he's a total carpetbagger because he wasn't even from Massachusetts. He's from Michigan. Then he went to Massachusetts, ran, and then he went to Utah because he's a Mormon. He's got a lot of people there as well. Yeah. So what was I saying? I forgot. Oh yeah, so I kind of washed through this war and realized it was really my discovery of Ron Paul, congressman from Texas, who was a probably one of the three most influential political figures ever. I would say like Ayn Rand would probably be one of the other ones. Again, people I don't agree with everything, but I read his book, A Foreign Policy for Freedom, which was a really radicalizing book for me. And he later wrote like End the Fed and all that, but this was before that. And I was like, wow, I was really hoodwinked into this idea that not only can America go and have this like empire, but that it's even compatible with our way of life. We're not an empire. We're not imperial. We're a republic. And I became deeply anti-war and deeply skeptical of military expansion and militarism and all the rest. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, I just learned the lesson that the people that were for the Korean War learned in the moment, the Vietnam War learned in the moment. Like, I guess you just have to kind of learn your lesson, unfortunately. And it's going to cause all sorts of problems around the world that you don't have to deal with. And it's fucking totally wrong. And it's totally backwards and it's heinous. So let's not do this again. And to me, I felt like the Middle East wars and the oil wars were like, okay, I think we all get it. We don't want to do this anymore. And it started to feel a little bit like the late 19th century in the United States. And then Ukraine happened. And the most recent invasion of Ukraine. And I want to be clear about this, though. I think it goes without saying, like, I think what happened to Ukraine and what's happening to them is wrong. I think it's based and steeped in strange ancient history that's irrelevant to me. And irrelevant to the region. It would be like saying like not that old. I was going to say Aztec. It would be like saying like the Iroquois history is like relevant to the United States. It's like truly not. I mean, it's interesting, but they have no claim on the land just because they did at one point. Times change. I'm not saying that what's happening to them is good, and I'm not pro-Russia. I have no love for Russia really at all. But I was confused why. Not confused. I was shocked when people were again propagandized right before our very eyes, this time with a war that literally has nothing to do with us. And not only was it like this fringe thing where everyone's like, yeah, passively support Ukraine. It was like this like litmus test. You don't support Ukraine? How can you our long lost, our greatest ally, Ukraine. I was making this joke on a show recently. I'm 39. Ukraine was ever mentioned 2 times in 2 contexts ever before, let's say before 2014, when all that shit went down with Odessa and all that, which is the Olympics, Winter Olympics, and NHL hockey, because players would come over from the Ukraine after the Soviet Union fell. Otherwise, you never heard about Ukraine. And suddenly it became like this bastion of freedom and this bastion of things that we have to protect and everything. And I look around, and this is where it gets in the class. What I've come to learn is that there's this idea, this dismissive idea in American politics where it's like, oh, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can do 2 things at once. Just because we're doing this doesn't mean we can't be doing this. And I look at this situation and I'm like, no. You guys are more excited to get weapons and money into the hands of Ukrainians that have nothing to do with us than you are in helping the poor on our streets, helping people make ends meet, making products, medicine, housing more affordable, investing in children, keeping our border secure, and all of the rest. And I just wanted to know 2 years out, because we're recording this actually on the 2-year and 1-day anniversary of the invasion. I wanted to go around, and I'll start with you, Dave, because we haven't heard from you in a while. I was like, where do you stand on this conflict? Do you feel like your opinion on it has changed? What is your opinion on it? Do you agree with me that we've been deeply propagandized in the United States to feel like this is our fight when it is not? It doesn't mean that it's not a fight. Doesn't mean that there's not a good guy and a bad guy. Doesn't mean that we can't pull for a certain outcome. Doesn't mean we can't even do economic sanctions and things like the things that we've done. But this idea that we're going to buttress some random country's fight against another country when we have all of these problems indicates to me that we can't walk and chew gum. We can neither walk nor chew gum. And I have no interest in what's going on. And this is where Tucker Carlson and I've been listening to him recently. We talked about him earlier, and I completely agree. It's like, until the shit is fixed here, I don't care what happens anywhere else. Like, those things happen in an order of operations in my mind. Until these things are taken care of, I don't want to hear about it. And that's really where I stand at this point. And it sucks to have been vindicated on my opinion on this as more and more people realize that this was a boondoggle to begin with, as potentially 500,000 soldiers have died. It's awful. And I'm sorry that we are involved in it at all, and that we prolonged this nightmare of a situation. We could have had a peace treaty a long time ago and refused to sit at the table. So I'm curious, Dave, let's go to you first. Where are you on this conflict?
Yeah, man. I mean, let me start by saying I am completely sympathetic to all our domestic problems here in the U.S. We have a lot of plates spinning and we have a lot of issues. Our coastal cities are falling apart. We have the border issues. We have a drug epidemic sweeping the country. We have poverty. We have all the things. I get it. And I really am truly sympathetic to that. But that really plays against the other thing I want to say, which is a couple of levels to, and it really starts with, I guess, maybe I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here, but I really do kind of feel like this at my core. Is it okay to let the bad guys of the world run roughshod over their neighbors? Ukraine is a sovereign country. Is it okay to let, to not check the bad actors of the world? I'm not talking about Zac Efron. You know what I mean? Talking about Vladdy Putin.
Right. Naturally.
And, so that is always at kind of the forefront of my psyche when I think about this, and kind of shades of True Detective season 1, like the world needs bad men. We keep the other bad men from the door. And I guess I do have a pretty non-isolationist sort of traditionally left-wing philosophy when it comes to this stuff, where I think the U.S. should be involved. I think it's
involved how we are now, or you mean like sending troops?
This leads to a question I want to ask you guys that I'm honestly confused about. But yeah, I think as far as being, I'm not saying it's our duty, but I'm saying there's a couple of things at play here. One is protecting a sovereign country from being invaded, which is just fucked up. The second thing is, how much of this is protecting our European allies, who, in a world that I'm not saying it's 1-to-1 with Vlad Putin and, Adolf Hitler, but who's next? You know what I mean? Now this guy takes over the Ukraine. Now does he go to Poland?
Why would he do that though? This is why people can never get past this hurdle for me. Is like, let's say
because
he took
his people on his cabinet have said Poland is in their sights.
There's no way that they're going to invade a NATO country. That would be the end for them. The end.
Okay,
it just
seems unbelievable. You know what Trump just said last week?
Yeah, I think he was kind of being flippant and joking, basically saying like, you either pay up or we're going to throw you to the wolves kind of situation. But I don't think.
Right.
Do I think that Russia wants the Baltics, wants Poland, wants to reconstitute parts of the Soviet Union? Perhaps, but I just don't see how that could possibly happen. How?
You may be right. You're probably right. But why would his cabinet, some of the people in his cabinet say that then? Just for fun?
I don't know. Maybe just to be provocative. I don't, because everyone knows this, but that's just Article 5. I mean, it's immediate World War III. I mean, if they go into Poland or the Baltics, it's over.
Sure, but when you've got the presumptive president of the United States based on polling going, if you don't pay your way, not only will we not help you, but we'll encourage Putin to go after you. That's what he said. I mean, forgive us or forgive some of us in America from not knowing when to take our leaders at face value and when to go, oh, he's just joking. I don't fucking know that.
Yeah.
But
that's fair. I do think that I think not only have we been desensitized to Trump, but I think that they know that Trump's people and Trump knows this. So I actually kind of feel like keeping the game going just constantly buries the last thing in some sense. Sure. It kind of goes into the strategy, which I think is somewhat canny. I never picked up on this strategy originally, but I kind of feel it now. It's like a political science kind of theme with Trump, which is that he can never normalize because not because he couldn't, but because he would never be allowed to. Because the things that he's said and done have already been so crazy and so many people that will always be brought up. So you have to just lean into it. There is some method to that madness, I think. So that's why I think he says things like this. Like we won't be talking about it in a month because there'll be three other crazy things that he said in between then. This is, by the way, I'm not voting for Trump.
I know. It's funny that he can say the craziest shit, but as long as he's not senile. If you're senile and say the crazy shit, it's bad. But if you say the crazy shit, you're just crazy.
Well, I think that.
But I hear you. I don't.
We can get in the Biden in a little while if you want. But
yeah.
So I think. Well, Gene, let's
wait. Do you mind if I?
I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, please.
No. I just want to. If you don't mind.
Take your time.
Yeah, there's I mean, this leads into a question for me too. I know what you're saying by Putin. Then he encroaches beyond Ukraine. Now it's political suicide. Now it's justified war and all that kind of thing. He's still the guy. Is coming with this rabid anti-West chip on his shoulder. Almost seems like a villain out of a movie, where it almost seems like revenge. You know what I mean? He almost carries that kind of flavor to him. And I don't want to sound hyperbolic.
I was going to say, isn't that the point then where it may be, and I'm not saying you're wrong because I get that too, but how shouldn't that be a red flag for us as media literate people to go, if he sounds like a comic book movie villain, he may very well be, but he may also be, that may be a narrative being spun because most people aren't comic book villains. I don't like Putin at all. I wish he had a bullet in his fucking brain. But I'm just saying that maybe the fact that we allow ourselves to entertain the idea that any of these people are comic book movie villains should tell us maybe we're being influenced a little bit by a narrative.
Sure. Possibly. And I think part of it is the optics. He paints himself that way. But I think the other thing is too, it's just, I think there's an inherent danger to trusting him or giving him the benefit of the doubt. It seems like to me, that's the read I get, but it leads to another thing of what I'm confused about. And as I toss this as I toss this whole thing back to you guys, I really want to pick your brains about this, where it seems very clear to me that this is already a proxy war between the modern day allies and the modern day Axis, right? Any civilian could go on Wikipedia and see which country is supplying jets, who's supplying the tanks, who's supplying the gunships, who's supplying the ground-based artillery, how much, at what cost. Here's what Germany's giving. Here's what Spain is giving. Here's what allegedly China has given, Russia. Here's allegedly what the UAE has given Russia. Here's allegedly what South Africa has given. Here's what Iran is providing.
Is that any civilian can not only go on Wikipedia, but they can go on Wikipedia and change it, including people. I'm not even joking with you. I mean, it's
whatever database.
No, I know we're not calling out Wikipedia, but I'm just saying that there's so much misinformation that comes intentionally at the hands of our government, their government, all of these people. It's like the line in that movie with Robert Redford, Sneakers, where the guy tells Robert Redford, he's like, you won't know who to trust. I mean, the only, now to quote War Games, the only winning move is kind of not to play, because I don't know what's true.
That quote comes up all the time on our shows. It's so funny.
It's so true, though.
The only winning choice is to not play. The only winning move. Dig, to ask you a question is like, so you're saying it's stacking up. I mean, I think that's obvious, but the question is like, why do we need to be involved in this? Like
No, I know it's
time for Europe to worry about itself. I think again, in my opinion, it's kind of crazy.
Frustrations.
Yeah, go ahead.
It gets back to your frustrations, which I get is like we're spending just us, not even considering our other allied countries like Australia and Germany and everybody else. Just us. We're spending countless billions.
We are paying their bureaucrats. We are paying their pensions. Like, I don't think people get it.
When we could be spending that money internally, I get it. Like, there's nothing I get more, but it's like, when do you stop? But I don't know. What's the top cost value? What's the ceiling on stopping a dictator from, again, running roughshod? I don't know. I don't know the answer, but that's why it seems to this simpleton to be complicated, because what's the answer? Where do you strike that balance? This is a bad man doing bad things. And I just don't think an isolationist policy, maybe on a smaller, less equipped country, but not on, I think it's inherent on the US to help in some way. I don't know if we're helping too much, but that's really the way I see it. And I think, as always, as dating back in history as it's always been, there's also for selfish reasons from our perspective, from our United States of America perspective on the whole thing. So that, that's, and it leaves me with as many questions as I have feelings about the thing. Certainly not answers, because I'm no expert, but that's how I end up feeling about the thing.
Gene, where are you on this conflict as it stands now? I'm taking it in any direction you want.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say other than, I'm wondering why we are in the conflict myself. So I Googled it, and here is the Center for American Progress, which is a progressive organization. And they are saying it's because autocratic regimes are watching the war play out to determine what lines can or cannot be crossed. In the State of the Union address, President Joe Biden made clear that backing Ukraine matters, quote, because it keeps the peace and prevents open season for what I could be spreading more propaganda than Colin. Sorry.
No, it's all good, man.
For would-be aggressors to threaten our security and prosperity, unquote. Without NATO support for Ukraine, which has created the quagmire that Russia now faces, the U.S. could see it embolden Russia advancing to the NATO border. And I also keep hearing a lot about how China is watching this, and it could be emboldening China to do Taiwan. Here's another interesting statistic, though, from my colleagues over at the Monkey Cage. It's a political blog, but they polled 2,066 Americans on what action they want to take in Ukraine, and they also polled at the same time, can they locate Ukraine on a map? And they found that the more likely you are unable to find Ukraine, the more likely you're able to support it. So I think
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it kind of feeds back. It's a data point, and when you talk about war propaganda or trying to garner support, public support for.
It's a little elitist, though, isn't it? It's like, unless you're intelligent enough in geography, you don't have
how can no, Jaffe, how can you have the context of the situation if you don't even know that they're in Eastern Europe? You have no idea what you're talking about.
You know they're next to Russia. What more do you need to know? You may not know the equidistance between them and Italy.
That's crazy.
But you know they're next to Russia.
I feel the same way about the whole Palestinian thing. It's like, and for people that are pro-Israel too, it's like, dude, if you can't immediately go to the Mediterranean, go to the east coast of the Mediterranean, put your finger down, you're fucking have no business, because you have no context for the geopolitics. Sure. It's geopolitics. The word is geopolitics.
Yes. But come on, that's semantics, and you know it. To go to somebody who goes, I understand that there is a ticking bomb of Egypt, Israel, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran, and they're all in proximity to one another, and there's a history between the land that is being contested. Oh, but I can't find it on a map, or I can't come on. I mean, you're going to throw out all of that because of a gotcha question? I mean,
I think we have we disagree here as well, because you're naming all these countries like it's the Middle East. It's like,
I know
it's the Middle East.
Oh yeah, at least understand. Yeah, sure. If you're like, I don't know what the Middle East is, okay, then we're in the ballpark.
It doesn't matter. It's all, you're right though. It is all semantics. Where are you? Well, first of all, Gene, before I door it over to Jaffe, I did want to say, I buy that argument in some sense. I was listening to an interesting debate on
about China, you mean, or
about both Ukraine and China and their kind of interlinking, like with Taiwan. I was listening to Barry Weiss. I like her podcast, honestly, and she's awesome.
I love his music.
And she had these two academics on. One of them was Brett Stevens. I can't remember the other one, but they were arguing about the Ukraine war. Yeah. And there's general agreement, I think, that I don't even want to say in a perfect world, but in like an equitable world where you have a global military force that is more powerful than its contemporaries, which the United States military is, that you would utilize it and leverage it in ways to help the free world, in quotes. Mm-hmm. But my argument against this is twofold, maybe even threefold, although two of them are related. The first is that all things are not equal right now. The United States is in a completely weak position, historically weak position. Its economy is in tatters, even though they keep telling us it's great. All you have to do is go to the supermarket and see how bad it is. The dollar has continued to be devalued. Inflation is out of control. There are millions of people crossing over the border. There's violence on the increase. Like things are not equal. So we're not really in a position, first of all, to do anything about a lot of this stuff. And my other arguments is that, and this is something Putin would argue, but I think is somewhat true, which is that NATO has been really provocative, and in reality should have been dissolved in the 90s. And I believe that. And that goes into me saying, like, NATO can exist still, but I think the United States should get out of it, exit it, and let Europe have its own EU army, and it already has its currency and all that, and just take care of yourself. The World War II is over, and if that means we have to leave Germany and all that, fine. Like, who cares? I don't want to have all of our bases all over the world like that anyway. But I do feel like there is some sort of provocation to saying, like, this thing existed to fight the Warsaw Pact and Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed, and then NATO continues to exist and just expands towards it, and even encapsulates like a bunch of its old countries. To me, I'm like, we didn't need to do that. And I think it doesn't make what's happening right now. I don't think that, but I think it's people need to be able to like say two things at once. And it's true that we shouldn't have done that. And I also believe that in leaving NATO, we should reconstitute a new multilateral alliance with countries around the world that is decentralized from Europe, because our problems are much bigger. Europe is actually almost irrelevant compared to what's going on, as we were noting, in Asia. Now, I don't think we should get involved if China goes after Taiwan either, but I think we will.
I think so too.
I think that we need to be prepared for that. I think that if that happens, the whole porcupine mantra, like, I think we should just be arming them to the teeth. And then when it goes off, it goes off. We see what happens, But
Kyle, don't you think dissolving NATO entirely or the United States leaving NATO only encourages Putin to be like, all right, have at it?
Well, potentially, but let me explain what I think I would do in turn. Is that I would create, like I said, a multinational new alliance, a global alliance with lots of different countries in it that would have NATO-like structures and even allow free trade, maybe easy currency exchange, maybe even free travel between the countries with very little problem. And it would be, and I've always said I would make it United States, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, So, and I think we should have dominion, Monroe Doctrine style, over our hemisphere. Like, I don't think we should be letting other countries fuck around here. I do think that that's like an important thing we should worry about internationally, if anything. And then I would go Japan, South Korea, India, Poland, maybe
Australia.
Yeah, Australia, of course, all the Five Eyes countries, Britain. And then maybe you get a couple of African countries in there. You might want to get Israel in there or a Middle Eastern country in there. Like, go around the world and select like-minded, strong countries that can pay their own way. We can all have an Article 5 with each other that protects each other, have fluid trade with each other. It's not to say it's not to say to go full isolationist and have an autarky where it's like, we are going to produce everything here. We are not going to go outside our walls. Although I think we should prepare for that eventuality in case that needs to happen. I just think we need to redraw the alliance so that so Europe can become Europe again and do its own thing without us. It can do what it needs to do with Russia and Ukraine. We have to worry about China. And I think we have to worry about what's going on the southern border, and in certain countries in South America as well. So we have our hands full. So Europe, like, it's not to say that what's happening there is right or wrong. That's why I just choose not to take a side. It's like we can't do anything about that. Just like we can't do anything about what's going on in Yemen. Just like we can't do anything about what's going on in Somalia and parts of Africa. It's like, these aren't our fights. We have other things to worry about. I really believe that way. I don't think that that's like a crazy thing to say, I'm sorry, Jaffe, you were trying to get in.
No, I just have two questions about that. So who in NATO right now, then, with your new group of Avengers, who would you kick out that doesn't belong there? Because you mentioned Poland would be in it, possibly.
I think.
So who is in NATO at the moment that you feel doesn't belong?
Any of the expansion, I guess, beginning, what was it, in 1998? I think
like what?
So it's like all of this. It's like the Baltics. All of the, like, Poland, I guess, would be in there. Certainly the new additions in Scandinavia. To me, it's not to say that they can't have a European alliance. It's to say, like, you're encroaching on their, like, I don't know why. Why are you?
I get it. No, I was just asking. I don't know.
It's like, to me, I'm like, why are we? I wasn't aware of this at the time. I was a kid, but it's like, if I were there, I'd be like, why are we doing this? It's over. Like, the war is over.
Okay.
We won. Like, we didn't even fire a shot and we won. To me, I would have been like, we should have had like a big, like in January 1st, 1993, there should have been like a huge celebration. It's like we're dissolving NATO. It's fucking over. Look at these chumps in Russia. They're fucked. They're done. They capitulated. It's over. Yay. And then we go about our business. Instead, like, we continue to constitute it and then expand it towards the territory of the old adversary and expect that they were going to be like, oh, that's cool. I just think that that's very provocative. It doesn't justify it, but why can't that be said? It's Ron Paul is the one who gave me courage to kind of say these things. He would call this stuff blowback. He used to say it about 9/11. It's like, it doesn't mean you deserved it. Doesn't mean it's good. It kind of means that it didn't come out of nowhere. And the invasion of Ukraine didn't come out of nowhere. Like, Ukraine could have signed a neutrality agreement and this would have never happened. Now, that's not for us to tell them what they need to do, but it's also not for us to, like, continue to arm them. And like Dagan said, a proxy war. This is the thing that I'm saying. Gene, you might be especially in tune to this, although Jaffe, I know you listen to the Sunday shows too, where there was this, they don't use this verbiage anymore, but I was very uncomfortable with this verbiage in 2022, where they would say, especially where there'd be like, you'd have like a national security advisor on or something, and it'd be like, we are able to kill Russians and degrade their military strength and all of this for very cheap or whatever. And it's like, to me, I'm like, I don't want to kill Russians. What are you saying? I have no interest in killing anyone.
That's hard.
You know what I mean? Like, but that is the language that they were using early on in the war. It's like, oh, this costs us nothing and we're fucking mowing them down.
That's fucking gross.
And I'm like, but Dagan, you have to understand that when you take the I'm not saying you're saying this, but like when someone takes the like very stringent pro-Ukraine side, that is the calculus in the Pentagon. They don't give a fuck about Ukraine. I guess that's like kind of the thing that you have to throw out there. They could give a fuck. They say it openly. They want to murder these dudes. They want to make it so that they can't do anything else. And it's
that's no different. That's not some new policy. That's neocons from the beginning.
Right, exactly. But why is it that it's the left, the Democrats are the neoconservatives now?
Well, I have an answer to that, but I want to ask you about the NATO thing first, because I think your idea See, I don't follow NATO all that much. Like I'm not, the only thing my first blush with NATO, which lodged into my brain, and maybe Dagan has this as well as a kid, as a Gen X kid, is, one of the first things they said in Red Dawn on the title card is NATO dissolves. I don't know if you remember that.
Dagan and I love that shit.
And I was just like, what the fuck is NATO? Shit, never dissolve NATO. The Russians are going to parachute in, because that's all I knew about it. Right. But anyway, your take, like, and again, maybe this goes back to media, but and I don't know what Trump's desires are. I don't know how much of a puppet he is or how much he actually has an opinion, if he even knows what the fucking NATO is, really, other than just a talking point. But when you say, I would like to dissolve NATO and here's what I want to replace it with, I go, oh, yeah, that actually kind of makes some sense. Yeah, of course. It's weird we don't have certain countries in NATO that you would think we do, and we do that you'd think, well, that's not any value to us, right? But I've never heard Trump go, when he says, I want to dissolve NATO, and this is why, blah, 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 blah. And I guess my question is, does he believe that when he says it? When conservatives kind of trumpet or parrot the talking point of we want to get out of NATO, do they say it assuming that the people who are listening to them understand it on a condition of having this kind of new, like I said, Avengers? Or are they just like, I don't know what NATO is, but Trump doesn't like it, so I don't like it? Like, what's the thing there?
Well, I think it's all through a financial. I think most of it's through a financial lens, because I think accurately some conservatives have identified it's like, this is kind of a vassal situation. Like, you're not paying the appropriate amount of money as promised in the charter. We're paying for everything, or most of it. Most of like NATO, if we left NATO in the way it is now, it would crumble, not because we left, but because they don't pay, And I think that a lot of people are just saying, like, you got to kind of do something about this. Like, we have other things to worry about. Like, we need to be worried about the Pacific.
Can they not pay, or they don't pay? Like, what's the excuse?
They don't pay. And I think the thing, and this is, I never really thought about this, but this is getting under a lot of people's skin, and I never thought about it through this lens, which is, these countries are always bragging about their amazing standard of living and their social systems, and they refuse to put 2% of their GDP towards NATO, which is what the charter says. So on one hand, they're like, look at how great our countries are. You guys have it fucking horrible over there, huh? We have free healthcare and free education and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's like, yeah, dude, that's great. We're also paying your military fees for NATO.
No, that's a great point. I did not know that.
Yeah, so that's the whole Trump.
But again, that nuance, I'm sorry, but I know you're not a Trump voter, but that nuance, shame on that part of the political spectrum. Because what I hear, and I don't just listen to the left. I go to Grounded and all that. I look at the right and the left and all that shit. But what I hear is, they're not going to pay their way, and it makes it sound like we're almost like the mob. If you want our protection, you'll give us money. But when you're like, it's not that, it's a literal, let me draw you from this point to that point. If they're not paying, their quality of life is better and we're suffering. That's the issue. Mm-hmm. And it's not like we're saying we're going to let awful things happen to people in other countries if we can help it, but don't ask us to hurt our own people. That's not part of the pitch. That's not part of the
I agree.
debate.
I agree.
And why? I mean, forgive all of us on the left and the right for having an opinion when, it's bullshit. It's bullshit, because the two things that you've brought up, your new version of NATO, and here's why paying their way matters to my life. I'm like, oh, that's perfectly logical. And I'm not saying I would agree or disagree. I'd still want more information, but those are not evil talking points when you present it the way you presented it. And I'm bothered by that. I'm bothered by the fact that we're not getting that information in the way that it can be of value. We're just being commoditized in order to, I get it. That's us. That's our world.
Well, this was a big thing that Trump was the first person. I mean, he didn't do it very successfully, obviously, in terms of communicating it, but this was a big thing for him, was like getting them to pay. And it does come off like a protection racket, but that's kind of, I think, the point, because it is. Mm-hmm. It is a protection racket, and that's why it needs to be dissolved. Like, we had an interest in stopping the Soviets from advancing into Western Europe. We assumed it was going to happen. We assumed it was going to happen way sooner, and then it just kind of never did. We thought we were going to fight them in the late 40s, early 50s. We had assumed that, and then there was a proxy war in Korea, right? And then there was another one in Vietnam, And we kind of avoided fighting them directly. So I look at NATO as like a massively successful exercise. It didn't have to do anything. And it just in existing was valuable. But the Soviets and the Russian Empire, the Russian Federation, are very different. The Russian Federation is not dangerous compared to what the Soviets. They just don't. They have a lot of nuclear weapons, but they're rational actors. If we were talking about like a jihadist government or whatever, and they were Russian, then I would be much more concerned about the situation, not in Ukraine, but just generally because they have a nuclear arsenal and they obviously have a fucking death wish and an apocalyptic kind of viewpoint. But the Russians don't want to die. Do you have not a solution, but is there a way out of the fact that look, as progressive as I am, those two things you said have sent me into a world where now I'm going to think about it. Right. And I may change my position on it. Why can't, and again, I don't expect people to listen to a fucking 5-hour podcast every day in order to get their political takes on things. And I understand there's financial value to not delivering messages like that because they take too long and nobody wants to read more than 3 fucking lines. But is there a solve to being able to disseminate this information and these ideas that will allow the average person, and I don't mean average intellect, I mean in terms of who doesn't listen to 5 hours of podcast all the time, to take this in? Because isn't that a big part of why we're divided? Is we don't really understand the essence of all these very complicated issues? Yeah, I think so. And I think. Do
you think there's a solve? Or
I think it's more conversation like this. I think.
Yeah, but you got to have 5 hours to get. How long have we been talking? And
it's hard to hash it out. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to get to this part of the podcast and go, oh, remember when Colin? Who's Colin? 99% of the people.
No, of course. I think you're right, but I think it's like. I know this just because I've done the basic. I listen to a lot of things, but just the basic amount of legwork.
It's not the basic amount. I do shit tons of legwork. I didn't know that because the basic amount of legwork, if you're interested in that topic, sure, but it's not in the syllabus for most people's year is to do the basic amount of legwork on NATO, right? It's not the norm.
Well, who's not paying? Because a lot of these countries have massive economies.
I can look it up, but if you want to keep going, I can check.
Some of the largest economies.
Gene, what do you think about? You're really the guy at a major newspaper that has done major fucking, good shit for the world. You guys must have this discussion at a high editorial level and on down about how do we communicate to a population that is getting less and less interested in devoting time to this shit, if they ever were. Maybe that's fantasy. But how do we communicate the nutritional value of this stuff in a way that will actually land?
I don't know. This whole time I've been reading pieces by my colleagues. And they're just saying.
I'm glad we were entertaining enough for you.
Well, they were sending. They're just writing, send the missiles to Ukraine to help Russia to help Ukrainians. It's just
maybe I had you confused with someone else. Then never mind, Colin.
I have an answer.
Can I ask?
I have an answer.
Do you guys mind if I ask one question? Do you mind if I just ask one more question? I think is important.
Wait, Dave, hold it real quick, just because you can ask the question in a minute. I have an answer to the other one, which is who wasn't paying and who was paying. This is crazy shit. Before the invasion of Crimea, so that was in 2014, almost no one except for the United States and Greece were paying what they're so basically to make everyone understand, NATO has obviously a joint amount of money to spend, but it's about individual defense spending. So you're supposed to spend your individual countries on your individual country's military 2% of your GDP to stay a member in good standing in the alliance. No one except for the United States was paying that in 2014. And the United States was substantially over it. And now you have countries like Poland and others stepping up because they're scared, but the following countries are still far below. Luxembourg, Belgium, Spain, Turkey, Slovenia, Canada, Italy, Portugal, Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic, Germany, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Albania, Croatia, Bulgaria,
all of them.
North Macedonia, Montenegro, France, Slovak
France.
Republic, and then so the only countries that are paying what they're supposed to be paying are the UK, Latvia, Hungary, Romania, Finland, Lithuania, Estonia, Greece, the United States, and Poland.
That's crazy.
Wow, that's shocking.
That's crazy.
That is shocking.
So
that is a
yeah. Well, I was going to say, like, this is what I'm saying is, like, we have been very generous to Europe, in my opinion, as a culture, and we should be. We're friends. We come from there. But people have to remember, we fought a heinous war in Europe that was involving them that we didn't really have to get involved in. And I'm glad we did. But you could see that we had a big problem in the Pacific. And we were like, we did deal with it first in a lot of different ways. And then we kind of went over to Europe. But when Europe was fucked up and we helped liberate it, along with the Soviets, who did a lot more than us to liberate it, unfortunately, for history. But that is true. We helped push the Soviets out as far as possible when everyone else was decimated so that they weren't become these communist vassal states. And then we spent an enormous amount of money rebuilding all of their countries. At some point, you have to take care of your own defense. You know, like it's so obvious. It's so strange that people don't look at this. Like, it's been almost 100 fucking years, you know?
All right, let me ask you this.
Well,
let me ask you this.
Wait, hang on. I'm sorry, because Gene, you were talking about, I don't want to, I'd like to get, you were talking about your friends, your colleagues saying send the missiles. Are you saying that they're not writing the nuanced shit?
No, they're not. They're advocating for the war.
Are they doing it because they agree with that?
No, because they're neocons and neolibs. That's who I work for, the Washington Post.
How do you feel about
that? They pay for my paycheck, so I feel great. So
yeah, fair enough.
That is all I can say. That's why I'm wearing the fucking t-shirt today, guys. Yeah. So I look at a computer screen and I'm reminded where I work, and I don't step out of bounds. You know,
fair enough. Dig, I interrupted you before. I just wanted to get that all out so we can.
And by the way, the people I am quoting is, like, for example, well, here's Mark Thiessen, who is a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush and my colleague. But he is also saying that if Republicans want to help Trump, then they should send aid to Ukraine right now, because what Trump wants to do is just basically end the conflict in, like, complete aggression style, basically. So he's like saying, like, yeah, like let's arm up Trump, you know?
Oh wow,
yeah, and he's Bush's former speechwriter, and he works for us now too. You know?
Wow, oh shit. Yeah, I mean, let me
go ahead, Dick.
So everyone thinks that the Washington Post is some liberal bastion, blah blah blah. But it's like, no,
it has been. I mean, that's its history. I don't.
Well, I think it's institutional, and this is an institutional point of view. You know.
Yeah, but we have exactly, and we have a bunch of former Bush policy heads working for us now, basically. You know.
Oh yeah,
they're creaming themselves. They love this shit.
Yeah,
they hope that they can't wait for a stray fucking missile to land in Poland. They are amped. You know, about the possibility. They go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, and no. Let me real quick quote my other colleague, David Ignatius, who's a foreign policy expert. He says, "Don't wait for the legislation. Send the missiles." Quote.
Great. Wow. Yeah. No, Congress has nothing to do with war declarations at all. So don't just bypass that. You know who's real happy about this? All the weapons manufacturers. Dagan, let's get to you. I've tried to pitch you 5 times.
Maybe you guys could educate me a little bit. I don't know, but maybe I haven't dug deep enough, but maybe you guys already know the answer to this. My thoughts and my sympathies oftentimes go to the Russian people in all this, because I honestly don't have a bead on how the Russian people feel. Obviously, we're dealing with an unsavory government over there, right? In a lot of ways, but how do the Russians feel generally is something I don't know. And I'm genuinely curious
about
to what
the war.
Just about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah,
I really would love to know what
you can. If you read the polls, there it's very popular, but this goes into the point of, like, how honest can you be in the polls? They'll disappear you for any reason. And this is what I'm saying. Like, Russia is not a savory place. It's not. It's better than it was in the Soviet times, but that legacy exists. Putin was a fucking KGB agent. It's not that far disconnected. It's not like it was another era.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Axes to grind. And I hate to boil it down to that sort of pulp, noir novel type shit, but that's kind of what it feels like. A classic Rocky IV thing that goes on, like with just like an anti-West axe to grind. I hate to simplify it, but it does. I don't know, the optics. That's how it reads to me.
One of the worst things as you get older is you start to realize, and this doesn't negate the previous point, because propaganda is a real fucking monster we have to deal with, but that a lot of these people in power, it's you want to believe it's some kind of like, we've got 1,000 of the best minds together. More often than not, you start to see that the levers of the world are being pulled by people who still have mommy and daddy issues.
Oh yeah, totally.
And it's a very personal thing, and we're all suffering from their inability to have gotten love when they were kids, or therapy.
Yeah, that's what every anime is about, basically, because anime understands that at a pretty deep level. You know?
That's interesting.
Give us a little Tetsuo shout there first. Yeah,
I'm still recovering from COVID, David.
Hey, he did the goddamn the B-52s.
Scream like I'm in fucking Akira, man. Like the worst scream of all time. Jesus.
My arm.
Here, so let me present to you guys, and I promised I would get back into class, and we'll do this as we wrap this topic up and get into our final topic. But
believe it or not, I haven't had my say on this topic yet.
Oh
so
yeah, no, Gene. I'm sorry, Jaffe. We'll go to you for sure. We can spend as much time.
Well,
I don't want to occupy your guys' time forever. But here's where I stand on this is I've become deeply populist. This is what I think you've been getting into a little bit, Jaffe. And what I realize, this is a thing that comes with.
Can you define that real quick first before you go on?
Sure.
Populist.
A politics that believes in an egalitarian approach, that worries about the everyman, that lifts its own people up within its, and again, a populism, a national populism. So I'm not talking about like a global populism. That's not possible. Okay. And this has been a radicalizing thing for me in that it's come by wisdom, because I really did believe certain things about reality and about politics that as you see them play out poorly, you realize, well, that's not actually true. There was a time when I believed in trickle-down economics. There was a time when I believed in an aggressive foreign policy. There was a time when I believed that you couldn't, have a weaker foreign policy and start spending money here. There was a time where I believed there was nothing you could do about immigration. There was a time I believed about all these things, but the reality is that it's like what people on the other side don't realize is they can Mott and Bailey me so bad right now. And what I mean by that is the Mott and Bailey approach is like, you make an argument that's clearly like ridiculous. You retreat away from it to like a more reasonable stance. People think that they've kind of got the win by sacking this part of it. And then you kind of get what you want in the end, like a part of it, And what they don't realize is like, they've pushed me so far left economically, like reality has in some ways, that you could take advantage of the situation by simply like, because people, you hear it sometimes. It's like, oh, we spent $100 billion in Ukraine. Would you rather us spend it here on the poor? And I'd be like, yeah. Not one and the other, one or the other. Right. And I keep trending back towards everything internal, like no more foreign spending. We do need to go through a period of isolation. I think it doesn't need to be permanent, but we need to like get our own shit in order. And this goes back into like, I care about what happens to the United States as a system and as a country. And until we can get our hands on things that are domestic, I simply do not believe in our ability to project power overseas. And I don't want to be a dickhead about this and put too fine a point on it, but I don't think our military is capable of doing the things we think it can do. I think that's been pretty clear in the post-war era. And I think we're in for a rude fucking awakening if we push it too far. And we should be preparing for maybe conflict with China, but hopefully not that. And that really should be the only thing on our minds, stacking the Pacific and worrying about all of that if we're going to worry about foreign policy. So go ahead and take advantage of me. The left is in a position now where it's like, if you just stop the foreign wars and get everything home, you could take all of that money and spend it here. I don't care. But I don't want the foreign entanglements anymore. And we won't get into this here, but it's like NATO is one thing. Like I want us out of the UN too, but we can get into that another time, because I think it's comical that we sit at these tables with half these countries. It's
real quick, you sound like Xbox when you talk about Xbox and why Xbox is taking all these publishers. And it's like, we can't even watch our own shit here within Xbox. Right. And now we got Call of Duty to worry about.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Suddenly the podcast is 50,000-60,000 views now. Thank you, Gene.
Just understand that the powers that be are distracting you and thinking that we can do all of these things when we can't. And we have big problems. Like Dagan said earlier, it's not only the coastal cities, like everything's fucked in the United States. It just is. Yeah. It's bad.
I think it goes deeper than that, though. I could be wrong because I don't want to sound like some conspiracy guy. But again, you talk about wisdom. I don't know if it's wisdom or just life lived, but the older I get, some of this stuff that sounded like crackpot theories. I mean, when you talk about the people in charge wanting, they should bring a lot of things back to America to take care of us. It assumes that the powers that be consider themselves part of the American experiment. I think, and I don't mean there's like some world secret government, nothing. I mean, there may be, but that's not what I'm talking about. I certainly don't have any evidence of that. But it's like you said, the weapon manufacturers, right? There are these people that sit above our institutions of justice, of legislation, of the executive branch that are, they don't care about Americans anymore than they care about Ukrainians. They're just like, I need the money. Totally. I need the power. And so the idea that we're going to turtle up and bring all those resources here, that would assume that the people who have been elected are actually working for us and care about doing that for us. They're not working for us. And I don't mean that like I'm making some, inflammatory statement. I mean, almost literally you could track, shut up, Jaffe, you idiot. But you could track the checks from who is influencing who. And it's all these companies that benefit. You think, Boeing or Lockheed wants, like you said, they don't want to not arm the Ukrainians. And so they're the ones in charge of these politicians. That's why Citizens United is the most evil thing that's happened in our lifetime, actually, in terms of American politics, because they now have total power. It never really was in our hands, but it's certainly not in our hands now.
It's ghoulish, in my opinion, how we just ignored Dwight Eisenhower in 1961. And
I wasn't here.
Well, the military industrial complex, like exits, speech, and it was,
we didn't ignore it, but what can we do?
It's so crazy because he already saw it happening. It was nuts.
He predicted.
And this is probably why fucking JFK was assassinated, because he wasn't going to get involved in Vietnam. Like, he didn't want to get too involved. Like, he wasn't crazy about the Southeast Asian domino theory and all that kind of stuff. And I just, not to get too conspiratorial, but it is true. It's like, these guys are ghouls. You have to go to these companies and say, like, listen, if making weapons for us isn't sufficient, then you need to figure something the fuck out, because it's not our job to lubricate wars around the world for you to sell weapons. It's nuts. It's like totally fucking sick. This is what I was saying earlier about killing Russians. It's like, what are you saying?
Yeah, but okay, but it's no different. No offense, Gene, because I think all of us would probably do the same. But it's no different than Gene saying, "Well, yeah, but I work for the Post, and so I'm wearing the T-shirt. I'm not going to step out of line because I'm getting the paycheck." Right? When you say what is sufficient, if you can't, and again, that's not an attack, Gene. I'm just saying because you just brought up on this podcast.
I'm cool. Don't worry about it.
No. I didn't say you were cool. Come on now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that ultimately, when you say what is sufficient to make, if it's not sufficient enough to make weapons for American interest, then there's a problem. It comes down to the definition of we are at the mercy of this financial system that we all live under, and the right thing to do does not benefit from that system. And so, I'm sure all these executives, if they just made weapons and tech for wars or the interest of America based on what the voters wanted, would be able to still afford really nice homes, and a couple of them all around the world. But that's not to them sufficient. And so, who do we see about that? I mean, that's really driving all of this, the disinformation, the wars, and this is not something wise. We've known this, but it's like, my God, when you say, why aren't we listening to Eisenhower? Because what do we do about it? We've known it, but what do you suggest?
I don't know. It's just like one of the architects of World War II is like, but guys, the weapons manufacturers that helped us win the war and like the whole like machinery, it's hungry. And
Right.
and you better be really careful, like the domino theory and like all of these ghosts that you're finding all over the world to fight. To this day, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
And think about how I used to just think, think about the fact that if you are a politician and you want to say to your constituents or you want to bring a bill up, it's like, I want to promote at a state level or a federal level media literacy. I want to promote this. I want to promote that will make a smarter electorate. They don't work for us. So do you think Lockheed wants these kids learning about the military industrial complex? Do you think they want them sitting in media training classes going, you see how Trump said, let's get out of NATO, and everybody clapped? Let's now actually figure out what he meant by that, because that's not enough information to go on. He might want to get out of NATO because he thinks the meeting room smells bad. We don't know. That's not enough information for you to say, I like him or I don't.
Yeah.
Right. Or same with Biden. They would say, I'm sorry, you're not going to vote for that bill if you want my fucking money. And Citizens United said that my company is a person and I can give you pretty much with dark money as much as I want, which will get you elected, because we have a stupid population because we've designed it that way. And so they just buy what the commercials tell them and what the talking heads on Fox and CNN tell them. We're not getting out of this. I mean, there needs
to be more force in, and I don't know how to define it really, but it's like, first of all, with the weapons manufacturers and these unsavory companies, like you got to go to the Boeings of the world and be like, listen, if this is a problem for you, you can extricate yourself from North Carolina, go to fucking Somalia and become a libertarian weapons manufacturer that sells arms around the world. But we have no interest in housing that kind of project in the United States.
Who's going to say that? Who are you talking to?
That's what I'm saying. You need a level of, you need force. You need a populist force. You know, I'm not saying like a literal revolution. I'm saying you need,
but they don't work for you, which means just because you say that, what are you going to do? Cancel Boeing? They don't work for you. It's not like we're not going to Boeing this week, honey. We're going to go to the other weapons manufacturer.
I just don't know. I just feel like if we believe that we can't make these changes in some way, then we are truly blackpilled. Like it's over, you know, in some sense.
We can make changes, but they're not going to come from using the systems that have been put in place by the people that we want to have changed. They've designed it, consciously or not. We've arrived at this place where, you know, we have no leverage in that way. It's like a lot of these fucking video game companies unionizing. It's like, yeah, your QA department unionized. That's great. It's a great symbolic gesture. But until you get the programmers on board and the producers and the lead designers and the artists, do you think Activision's going to be like, oh no, the QA guys aren't coming in? That's not a problem.
It'll just make it more expensive to lay them off. That's what that.
And let's just outsource these fucking guys who do QA in Shanghai. Done. All right, what's next? Right? I mean, the scenario exists because it fucks us. And I don't want to be like, the only solve is revolution. I don't want to do that.
That's what it sounds like you're saying.
I don't know a better way, because I think ultimately we're going to be in such pain because we're going to be at such a level of scarcity of resources that there will be no other option. And that's why when I look at something like January 6th, I don't agree at all with those people. And I certainly do think, and that's a different conversation, that it wasn't a protest, whatever. Fuck you, no. I don't believe that. But some people do, and that's fair. But I still am staggered by the fact that fundamentally I agree with that sentiment, which is our government is not working for us. They're working for other people and they're not representing us, and we're fucking sick of it. That's amazing to me that the left and the right do meet there.
Yeah, and I think this is why I think Vivek Ramaswamy had a really interesting idea. It would be unconstitutional and certainly challenged in the courts, but like you have to do something like come in and say like, literally, if you have an odd number at the end of your social security number and you work for a government agency, you're fired. Like you have to basically just say like, we have to get rid of a bunch of you. Too many permanent staffers, too many deep state operations, too many things that don't listen or have any sort of connection with elected officials. So his whole idea was like, you have to find some
from Thanos.
You have to find some sort of like really just like random way to just, that seems efficient and both maybe fair in some way, to just be like, you're gone. Like we have to actually get new people in and like new ways of thinking about things. Because it doesn't even, this is where I think the entire theory of like the deep state is so manifestly obvious. It's not even like true or false. It's just obvious. Like they're bureaucrats, and the buck really does stop with them in a lot of different ways to stop change. Like you can elect officials and do all sorts of stuff, but if we keep saying like the powers that be are just too powerful, then that means that you have to do something about the powers that be. And I don't think the powers that be are the elected officials. I think it's the institutions. That's why it's so interesting. The idea of like dissolving the CIA and the FBI, for instance, are so interesting. Not that you don't need an international police force or a domestic police force, but that you need new ones. That are beholden in different ways and have different rules and all sorts of that. You have to shut old systems down.
But the same nuance that the liberals should have used when saying defund the police, they didn't really mean we don't. Some of them did, but most of them didn't mean we want all the police gone. It meant we need a rethinking of what policing is like in America. The same way they dropped that ball, I think the right drops the ball because, again, Colin, and I don't want you to leave podcasts and go into politics, but your nuance, it's not even that nuance, but you going, this is why I think the CIA and the FBI should be disbanded. And then you immediately follow it up with, and it should be replaced by something that does the same job, but in a more efficient way, like your take on NATO, right? All I hear on the news is, I want to get rid of the CIA. I want to get rid of the what was the guy, Perry from Texas, who's like, I want to get rid of the Board of Education.
Rick Perry.
And I'm like, okay,
Rick
but
Perry,
you
my
don't.
boy.
If you don't follow it up with what are you going to replace it with, or how are you going to take the good stuff? All it sounds like is like Dagan saying, it sounds like you're a comic book villain, which is like, I just want to get rid of this government agency that protects everybody in America. Where's my mustache to twirl?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but that's the information that people are getting. Not the fact that it's like, and I want to replace it with XYZ. And that's a real fucking problem.
Well, we need to figure out a way to have an equitable society that treats people fairly, that gives quality education, that allows people to advance. And I just think the money situation is I think the most urgent situation in the United States is by far wealth inequality. That's it. I don't even like so many other issues are irrelevant to me. That's what I was saying earlier about intersectional racial divisions and all that. It's like, dude, whatever. Like, it's really about the haves and have-nots. And this is a cross-racial, cross-gender, cross-generational situation. There are people in this system that have way, way, way too much money. And they should have never been allowed to accumulate this much money. And this is a very radical thing for a person like me to feel, but I think it's true. I don't think like even a free market was supposed to exist that was this precariously situated on so few people having so much and so many people having so little. It's not tenable. Yeah. And and this is why this is what I say earlier. You were talking about like, oh, you can't just have 3 houses. It's like, that's what I'm saying, dude. Like, why can't you have a few $1 billion? Like, why do you have to have so much? What do you need so much for? And why wouldn't you
my answer to that would be, I don't think, I don't know this. Maybe there's something in the brain, but that they have that I don't, or we don't, or whatever. But I think there is a human reaction that anybody would have. And I'm not saying because I felt it, but because I've seen it play out. When people get money, when people get power at a level like that, I think their worldview and their view of just the day-to-day changes to such an extent that I don't think they see themselves like Gordon Gekko. Gordon Gekko doesn't see himself as the villain, right? It literally is a sense of, this is my normal and this is what I need to be satisfied in the day. And I don't even think they look at people as human anymore that work for them. And I don't mean that like they're evil. I think it's like power corrupts, money corrupts. And the Constitution actually does have levers in place to deal with that. The problem is the amendability of the Constitution, which is one of the great things about it, has gotten fucked because before we could amend it, the corrupted powers that be put systems in place to make it almost impossible to make a new amendment, which is ridiculous. But that's where we're at. It's a really hard. I don't know if there's a solved puzzle, Like get Einstein's Chat GPT together and go, can you solve it? And Sean Murphy from The Good Doctor. Maybe those three can figure it out.
Dr. Hahn.
I don't fucking know. Yeah. Oh, I love the show. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No,
didn't mean to interrupt, but it fascinates me.
No, it's totally fine, dude.
I'll say is I tell everyone I know that I will not be one of the good billionaires. Absolutely not. Do not give me $1 billion. I will use it to chase the dream of immortality at any cost. At any cost. Whatever cost.
But that's not going to hurt any. Okay, well, if you start hurting people,
no. If it will hurt people, I will do it. No problem. No problem. If it hurts,
okay.
It doesn't matter how many people it hurts. If it gives me immortality, with the billions that I have, I will do it. No problem.
Gene, a closet full of Louis Vuitton
Alexa, can you call in 5150 in Washington?
If they have to suffer, then they will.
Wow,
that's good.
That's deep. So, that was kind of like when I was talking about how these people need to die off, and you were like, "Yeah, they literally need to die." And I was like, "Holy shit!" Gene's got a dark sort of edge to him.
I'm locked in the quality.
You can't see the bottom of his t-shirt. The bottom of his t-shirt says "Democracy dies in the dark," and then it's an ellipses and says, "And so will you, motherfucker."
Yeah. And so, yes, indeed. So, Dig, you had, or I'm sorry, Jaffe, did you get your answer in about the situation itself?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say though is there is a part of this I think that is important to suggest that when Russia went into Ukraine and all these bombs started dropping and we saw the aftermath and the horrors, I don't think we need to have a discussion about it so much as to just bring it up, because I think there's some validity that when you say why this war, why this propaganda, why did this work? We don't see a lot of people who look like, quote, us. We don't see a lot of American looking, white looking people, waspy looking people getting killed by bombs and being invaded. They're usually people of color. And it's easier, I think, for a lot of people in America to just go, well, that's happening over there. And this was the first time it's like, oh, you mean a programmer who makes the games I like, right. Died going to war? Or we saw a mom holding back her little 3-year-old daughter from a father getting on a train to go fight, and he may never come back, and her eyes are just watering and she's bawling, and he looks just like me, or he looks just like my neighbor. There is power to that. And I don't think it's good, and I don't think it's fair, and I don't think it's something to brag about, but I do think it's a factor that's worth mentioning. That's all.
That's a great point. And I think that is true. I think it's inappropriate too, just because, and this is why people act like, oh, there's this theater of war. I'm like, dude, do you have any idea how many open theaters of war are happening right now? You just don't know about them because they're not talked about or not discussed. And that's my whole thing. We can't do anything about all this stuff. I remember I was saying in the, what was in Darfur in the 90s, like there was this entire idea that the US can get involved there and like send Marines, but we couldn't because we were kind of extended and people weren't really interested in it. And then years later, we end up in the Middle East in these wars we weren't supposed to be involved in. And it's like, damn, we could have actually done maybe some good even in some sense in some of these situations. But I just think generally speaking, we have to have kind of a dissociative relationship with the rest of the world for a little while and let them deal with some things themselves and worry about us. And as far as
there is no us, it's the weapon manufacturers. I'm sorry, it just always comes back to that. Well, the idea that you're going to bring these people back in and go, let's take care of infrastructure and homeless. They don't care. They don't give a fuck. They want more weapons.
You have to appeal. There has to be a way to appeal to their rationality. Like you need to have a solid system of educated, wealthy people.
What would be rational about it?
Because their companies don't. Like generationally, you'd be like, your company will be better served coming from a better society, like a society that's more stable, as opposed to.
Then they'll be like, well, what do we make weapons for if the society's more stable?
To be used, they want to use them elsewhere, and that's the whole point of saying there's no more choice towards this anymore. We could also facilitate weapon sales between our new alliance. It's like there might be a way to sell these weapons, but the one thing I wanted to say as far as wealthy people before we get out of this is I just think there's such a huge difference between having hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars. And people ask, it's like, what are you supposed to do about that? I don't really believe in a wealth tax. First of all, a wealth tax is unconstitutional. So talking about amending the Constitution, that's just, you would have to do that. But I think that
Well, okay, but just because something's unconstitutional, so what? The idea people have started to take the Constitution like it's a religious text, given
it just wouldn't be. I'm saying it just legally wouldn't be possible to do what I'm gonna.
I know, but maybe that's a problem that we cannot fucking change this document that has passages that are so outdated because the political people who run the machine aren't going to let us make the changes because it makes our lives better, but they become less wealthy. Because what you just said, it's ridiculous that we couldn't get a wealth tax or something.
Well, I also just don't know that I like a wealth tax because I don't want my need to get money out of the very wealthy hands doesn't mean I want it in the government's hands. So what I would think is that there's got to be some sort of clever way at the very wealthy levels to basically say, like, listen, you either pay a massively punitive tax rate, like 90%, or you agree in a fashion very loose in the way that you think is best to donate after this much money, 70% of your money, So like say like
to one of these 500 charities,
right,
it can't be like the Nazi party,
right, or something, or just like even looser. It's like give it to your church, build a fucking rec center, just do something with it, or you pay a massive punitive tax to us. Like something like that, I think would not only be good for communities and for people, but shake some of that money loose that I think it's not that money is going to solve all of our problems. It's not. I'm not one of those people that's like seize all of it because it's not going to do shit. Like we have a big financial issue in the United States, but it's just a level of fairness. Like no one should have that much power. Hundreds of millions of dollars should be enough. Like that should be enough for you. And if you can't make that work, then you have to think that there are just people with, it's okay. There are people that just with nothing. And I am really concerned about our own people. And it's just sad, dude. It's sad to see. You were saying earlier, Jaffe, like we're in positions of, we're not like paycheck to paycheck grinding it out. Right. Like there are people that are going to the supermarket and like having to put things back because it's so expensive.
I know.
Like there are people that can't pay their fucking bills, and then they just keep sending money hand over fist to foreign conflicts while they let millions of replacement workers over the border to take all of the low income jobs and drive fucking costs up and value of jobs down. It's a horrifying situation out there if you're in the fucking trenches.
Part of the problem with that part though is it's hard, like the debt, right? The average, including me, by the way, I understand the debt is bad. I don't really understand what it means. I understand we've paid more interest on our loans to other countries this year than we ever have, but I don't really understand.
I can explain it to you if you want why it's bad.
I don't.
It's
sure.
Well, it's very simple.
But hang on. Yeah. But the bigger point, though, isn't that I have you here to explain it to me, and I have arrived at a position in my life where I have the time and interest to have it explained to me. But what I'm saying is the bigger problem is issues like that. Like, oh, you're paying this money to this foreign thing, and this is how it's affecting you. You just have politicians going, see, and it raises the debt. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, I guarantee you, if you ask most people, they don't know how that would, like, why is that a bad thing? We know why the concept of you being in debt is bad, but we don't, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think people are probably more educated on it now than ever because of inflation, because that's deeply tied into that. But like the reason the debt is being so high is such a big deal, and really it's the deficit that's the big deal, but the rising debt is the big deal too, because we have to, I think it's Gene might correct me, it's every 5 years, I think, we refinance our loans, like by law. And they're refinanced now, they're going to be refinanced at these high interest rates. So
but stop right there. Our loans, so the American government needs money to do what?
There's all right, so there's the military pie, and then there's the discretionary pie, and then there are social services.
Okay, but take the military pie. So Boeing has to get paid a certain amount of money. Okay, so you're saying that instead of just going to the reserve and saying, let's print a bunch of fucking money, boys, we run the shit, we need to go take a loan out from China?
Well, it's basically the same. China only owes I think a couple $1 trillion of our debt. I don't think people overstate that whole thing, but you don't want to print money like that, but that is kind of what they're doing. They basically make new debt and sell it off. And so when you print off a few $1 trillion, it just dilutes everyone's value of their money. So just the idea of, because there was this idea in modern monetary policy of like saying like you could print basically $1 trillion coins to pay the debt off, and basically just say like, oh, we just made $10 trillion in these coins, bye. But that would be disastrous to the value of, we would have like a Zimbabwe style, like 10,000% inflation situation. So we have to,
so hilarious.
Yeah, no, it would be not like Weimar Republic style, like you're like burning it to like, you're burning your money to like stay warm. And the to me, so they need to go borrow money because the money needs to exist. The Federal Reserve only exists. The Federal Reserve is acting deeply politically because it's going to lower interest rates. And I think it's doing it to help Biden. I think that's fairly obvious because interest rates should be going up, way up still, because inflation is so bad. But you need to go and find sources of existing money that wants to be infused into it, but you're borrowing it at a higher rate. So when you're doing that, you're not only borrowing new money at a higher rate, but you have to refinance all of your old debt. The debt is one problem, but that we're running a deficit. These are two different things that people, I think, kind of conflate. We are running a deficit, making the debt worse. The first thing we have to do is to stop running a deficit. Once that's over, then we can kind of stem the bleeding and start paying the debt down without going into the red, you know? So we are in big trouble though, because we are nowhere near not running a deficit. Jaffe, even the big plans, you know, where they're like, we're going to balance the budget. They're like, it'll take 10 or 15 years with some of these plans to do it. Like we have to do it immediately, really. And that's going to cause, that's why what happened in, Argentina, where the new prime minister, he balanced the budget. He fired half of the government, you know, like he just straight up fired them, you know, and they have a balanced budget now.
But do they have worse quality of life because half the government's gone or no?
I mean, I think it's unclear, you know, at this point, but like, so things like that have to happen. So just to explain it, that's why accumulating the debt is a problem. It's not that we can't pay the principal back in theory, because we bring in plenty of money. We spent $6 trillion last year, but we only brought in like 4. You know, like,
well, yeah, part of it was all the Marvel movies didn't do as well as we had hoped. Right. But you know,
so we need to roll that all back, and taxes are not going to solve it. It's a spending problem. And
okay, but then why again? I don't want to. So if it's a spending problem, do you think it's wrong whenever a lot of these people put the charts up and say the Republicans campaign on not spending, but their presidents always spend a way lot more than the Democrats?
Oh yeah, it's a totally both. No, that's true that the Republicans are big spenders too. My whole thing is, I think the Republican position is, and I can say this with confidence, is like, regardless of how much money you need, we pay enough. And that, I think, is a strong argument. It's like you're paying
as 30, an individual in terms of tax,
right? Like we have a graduated percent, a percentage of income tax bracket, and they're like, this is more than enough. Plus state taxes in California, a rich earner will pay more than 50% of their income in tax between the state and the federal government before write-offs and all that, because it's like 39 plus 13, right, or 38.5 plus 13. So theoretically, you go over 50%.
We pay a lot. I don't know if I've.
Well, no. I mean, I lived in California. The taxes are. I mean, you get a lot of write-offs and all that kind of stuff. But that's
what I'm saying. Because I don't do my taxes.
I saved an enormous amount of money by leaving, and I'm not even like the kind of earner I'm talking about at all. But
no,
So, does anyone have anything else to say on this topic? Because I know we have to get to Jaffe still. I don't want to keep you guys forever. Anything?
I'm good.
Okay.
There's one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jaffe said about identity politics, and it's interesting to see a lot of journalists get fired for saying things that free Palestine, and that's been happening a lot, right? But when management or of these newsrooms say free Ukraine, nothing happens. And it goes back to what Jaffe was saying earlier about how much easier it is to identify with Ukrainians versus Palestinians
or Israeli, or the Israelis,
or Jews even too. Yeah,
like I agree. Like that's a whole. I don't even get.
So I mean, that's kind of where like identity politics would matter, you know, in a sense. Wouldn't you agree with that, Colin?
Yeah, right? I do agree with that, because I think that there's an inborn sympathy towards Israel, regardless of what they do, that you kind of have to check. That's innate to that country and our position on that country. So,
Yeah.
my whole thing with Israel is just, I'm sympathetic to Israel. I just don't think we should be involved in this.
Yeah.
Like, that's just it's a kind of a consistent position. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, you have to do, you guys do what you got to do, you know, but
it's consistent. Which is why a lot of leftists also say, man, if Trump just says, let's just get out of Ukraine and Israel, then Biden's cooked. That's it. You know?
Yeah. Like, if you had to kind of trade one for
the right and the left.
If you had, exactly. If you had to trade one for the other, you know, I think I would take that deal. I'd be like, fine.
Yeah.
Like 100% I'd take that deal. Cause I don't want to be involved. Like, I don't,
if you could trust him on it, but yeah.
Right. Exactly. I'm not crazy about what's going on with Israel just because I don't know. We had said this in the past, is like, there has to be a radical movement towards kindness. And I know that sounds so naive, but the only thing that's going to break that cycle is someone stopping the cycle. That's it.
That's everything.
And like, until someone makes the move, like, I was seeing pictures of Gaza. I was like, holy shit, you know, like, it's gone, you know? And what do you think you're doing to that? Like, regardless of the position and that you were the victims, no doubt that there was a ceasefire that they broke. Yeah. That's all true. Yeah. But like, what do you think you're doing to their young people? If I were one of them, I would come for you too. You know, like,
I'd be super radicalized. Yeah.
Like, there's just no doubt about that. Like, that's why you have to look at
it's like it's the Toby line where he says they'll like us when we win, right? Maybe they're just like, fuck it. We're going to bomb the fuck out of it and we're going to change it forever. In 100 years, their children will be our children. And I mean, I'm not saying I agree with that, but there is a point where maybe they're like, and this is what maybe it goes back to about even, you know, when Gene's like, I'm not calling for revolution, but it's like, maybe the only thing that works is that kind of shit. As much as we don't want to admit it and agree to it, we're not fighting the Native Americans anymore. Right. I mean, it's, you know, it's a horrible thing. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying, but if you take a totally unemotional position, like you're observing as an anthropologist from another planet, you're like, these people spend a lot of energy doing this, that, and the other, but violence and threat of life and getting rid of the people you can't convince, that's kind of the only thing that ever brings any kind of real meaningful global change. I mean, that's accurate, isn't it? Am I wrong? Am I being cynical, or is that a relatively scientific accurate?
Again, this is why when I become a billionaire and if anyone gets in the way of my path to immortality, you're fucked. You're done.
Gene, I want you to hear this from the heart. As long as you work for the man, you'll never be a billionaire. The minute you break away and do what Colin's doing,
that's why I've never been a billionaire.
You're going to be Colin's biggest pain in the ass, because you will be Colbert to his Jon Stewart, and you'll be like, "But I was the number one guy."
Man, don't say that. Come on, that's so. I don't want to be Colbert to anyone.
To anyone's Jon Stewart. Yeah,
yeah.
I want whatever
Jaffe. I don't want to insult Colin. I don't care about that. I just don't want to be Colbert. I understand.
I want what anyone. All right. So, by the way, I have a novel solution to the Israel problem that I've been floating like behind the scenes, and I really mean this, by the way.
Drop a bunch of Mormons in by parachute and convert everybody.
This is what you do. You have and this is just this. I'm just pie in the sky, right? You take Gaza and you give it to Israel, right? The whole Gaza Strip. You take that piece of land, like the territory that size, you multiply it by like 10. You go to a place along the Jordanian border or up towards Syria, like where Galilee is, and you just give a piece of Israel up there that would connect to the West Bank to the Palestinians, and then they have a continuous state. Then you no longer have this area of Palestine that's just surrounded by water, by Egypt, which doesn't want them either, and then by Israel. You just move. I know it sounds shitty. It's like I don't mean it to be like Trail of Tears, but it's like to get this over with. And that's why I say, like, give them 10 times more land than what they have right now, and just push it against the West Bank, so that
how much of the excuse that they've had an opportunity to have a two-state solution, and every single time it has been the PLO at first, and now whoever Hamas that has said, we don't want that, we want the Jews dead. How much of that is true and how much of that is propaganda? Because your position works if there isn't a religious but we want Jerusalem, we want, you know, all the place, we want where Muhammad ascended, we want all that.
Right, but like I'm not an expert on Islam, but and Gene, you might know this, as I understand it, there's nothing about Gaza that's special towards
Not Gaza, but if you're going to basically say
from the Israelis, you're saying, yeah, you would have to figure it out because it would be like up towards Galilee and all those kinds of things. I just want, like, you have to make it so that it's a continuous state, so that then they can just, then the Israelis can just.
Thing they're doing. Is it a political thing that they're telling to their people, oh, this is why we want Israel gone? And your thing, it's like, no, dude, it's really about the land and it's about money and it's about power and everything else. And we'll rebrand it for the Palestinians that this is more acceptable because look how much more land we have.
Well, I think
that's what I'm asking.
Well, yeah, no, I think what you're speaking to is like a level of radicalization that I think we have to accept is not going anywhere. And so like they just have to isolate it in one place and then worry about it later. But at least they're fighting on three fronts right now because they have to deal with Lebanon, or Hezbollah anyway, and then they have to deal with the West Bank, and then they have to deal with Gaza. So like this helps everyone if they just did this move and just got rid of Gaza as a Palestinian territory, gave them a ton of land on the eastern end of Israel, and moved them there. The Israel, not to be facetious, the Israelis are experts at colonial settlements and like doing those kinds of things. This is what they do. They're like one of the only modern countries that do that. So do it, and
Saudi Arabia has so much money. Well, no, we don't want Israel to go anywhere. I was going to say, just give all the Jews New York, right? Just move them all to New York.
They're already there anyway. That's where we're.
I know, but I'm saying it would be, and then that. But ultimately, practically speaking, though, it is a geopolitical issue. You don't want to have the one democracy in that area in New York City. So I get it.
Well, it's the best of a bad situation. Like the only solution is a 2-state solution, in my opinion. That's it. And there can't be a 1-state solution, and neither of them are going anywhere. So you just have to deal with 2 states that don't like each other. But at least that we can get to that point, like where it's just 2 geographic entities that don't like each other. This will calm everything down, I think.
But they've tried that several times, and every single time the leaders of the Palestinians walk away. Clinton almost had that, and then Arafat walked away. And it's like, what the fuck? We were done. We had it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was in 2000. The last meaningful, I don't know. The one thing that people will say is like, this removes water access for Palestine, which I totally understand, but I just don't know. You could have, I guess, you could have like the Baltics have a similar thing for Russia, right? There's like a piece of Russia that's in the Baltics. You know what I'm talking about? Like a small piece, and then there's like a road that goes to Russia, but it's surrounded by all these other post-Soviet countries. So maybe they could do a similar thing. I don't know. All right. Finally, we arrived, Jaffe, to your topic, which you got to us. I'm very curious to see what you have to say about this. Have you been radicalized?
No. But let me cut to the chase, which is we're going to start with the 2020 election and was it stolen? And then we're going to move, believe it or not, to 9/11 conspiracy theories. Where we are going to arrive is where we've already arrived, though, which is we're fucked. And the powers that be are not the powers that we think, that we elect, and we're fucked. That's where all this is going. But let's start with this. So, a lot of people on my show listen to your show and they say, we like you're open-minded, blah, blah, blah. And they'll reach out to me and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And some of them talk about the stolen election, 2020, the big lie, whatever. And I said to this one guy, he goes by Zeke 1970. He's like, let me just send you some stuff. And I said, okay. He's like, in good faith, open mind. He sent me a handful of things. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to read this. I'm going to take it on Colin's show because I told him we're doing a political constellation soon. And, I'll bring it up to them, see what they think, blah, blah, blah. And so let me tell you my experience with that. So at first he sent me a bunch of stuff saying, here's proof of election fraud. And I looked at it and there was a lot of facts, citations. And I said to him, okay, well, who wrote this and who funded it? Is there any context? He says, I believe the report was prepared by a company called True the Vote. I said, okay. So I did some research into it. And obviously this report is this was stolen and this was illegal and this was ballot stuffing and this, that, and the other. So True the Vote is a organization that has made all kinds of claims. They've never proven them. They've been asked to prove them. I'll read you this briefly. This is just from, this was CNN interviewed their main dude. They're the group that if you watch that Dinesh D'Souza movie,
that's the Mules or whatever.
The 2000 Mules.
Yeah,
they were apparently where he got a lot of his information from, and they keep being asked to sort of okay, where did you get it from? And they don't show anybody, right? So this is what he was actually on. One of the heads of the company was on like CNN in 2012 or something, or no, 2017 about the 2016 election. And when Trump was going on saying, I won the popular vote by 3 million views, and they're lying about it, they interviewed the guy who runs True the Vote, and they're like, okay, I wish I had it, but I ended up having it on my phone. In fact, you know what? I'm going to, this is worth reading. Hang on. That'll take me 2 seconds. CNN, Cuomo. He said, he's like, oh, I'm going to come onto the show and I'm going to show you guys, proof of this, right? So he goes on to the show, and I don't have it here, but he says, okay, well, you have proof. And the guy says, yeah, I have proof. And he says, okay, well, what is it? Well, we're not going to show it to you right now. He's like, well, when are you going to show it to us? He says, now's not the time. He's like, I didn't just bump into you in the hallway. It's like you came onto the show to talk about this. So that was even back with Clinton, right? So now these guys have been overruled, blah, blah, blah. Their stuff is clearly agenda based. But let's go beyond that. So people say, oh, no, that's propaganda. If you actually look at a lot of the cases that people say, oh, Trump, and I had a lawyer write this to me, right? This is the guy, Zeke, who sent me this. A lot of the talking point on the left or whatever is, no, all the cases that Trump and his people brought about voter fraud were pretty much thrown out of court. And they're like, no, they actually, that was on technicalities, or a lot of them, this, that, or the other. And there's some that they actually won some, right? So I went to the list that they tweeted that they won. Here's an example that they cite. Trump won in Philadelphia against, what is her name? It was basically Kathy Boockvar versus Donald J. Trump. And it was like, you can't, she was basically saying that you extended the voting period without ID, and so you can't do that. And so the court said, yeah, okay, Trump wins. But what they don't report is that was appealed up to the Supreme Court in that state, and they said, yeah, that you're ridiculous. There's no way. She did her job. There was nothing here. But they don't cite the appeals that continually got lost, right? So it's very easy, if you really take it one by one, to go through this and say, okay, well, that's horseshit. All these things don't make any sense. They don't add up. In fact, the leader of this group, who runs True the Vote, has spoken for Trump on his rallies as of recently as like a couple of months ago, like in December or November. So there's some bias going on, and there's some, if you actually dig into the facts, it's not really happening. But I'm still willing to keep an open mind, right? So I continue to explore this stuff because I'm like, there must be some basis of truth here. And I'll be honest with you, and maybe you know, but I can't find any. And when True the Vote comes out with their big 40-page report and you're able to debunk it all, then I go, okay, well, wait a minute. And the D'Souza video or whatever, 2000 Mules, has been debunked, and has been even brought into court and has been debunked by lawyers going, we can't offer you any evidence of what we're saying. At first I was stunned by why this lie continues. I know it's fun to believe because the guy that you wanted to win, if you wanted Trump to win, lost. And in that, this feels better than just the majority of people didn't vote for him. And I can tell you, I don't have any love for the Democratic Party. I tend to vote Democrat because I like them a lot more than the Republican Party, but I would much rather, if there was proof of voter fraud and we had the wrong guy sitting in the chair, I don't want that for our country. If the country is a bunch of people that would rather have Trump, as much as I despise him, that's the country. And he did win the Electoral College, so he was the president, for a time. So I don't know what they're citing and why this is still has any oxygen. So I do want to get to how it connects to 9/11 to some weird way. But before we get to that, I do want to go, am I missing a big piece of evidence that has been cited that is actually able to be legitimately looked at and studied by unbiased people to go, yeah, they have some really good points. It's not to say there aren't a couple little, 10 votes here, 4 votes there, but the amount of votes they're talking about that would have turn this election are staggeringly high considering the lack of evidence for that claim. Do you guys know something I don't?
No.
Yeah, you want to go, Gene?
No, I mean,
He says he doesn't.
There wasn't a massive amount of unbiased people counting the votes. It was called the people working the polls at the 2020 election. That's who they were.
Yeah,
It already happened. Like that's what I'm saying. It's like we've already counted the votes. You know.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
what you're go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was going to ask, so you're saying you don't believe there was fraud?
No.
So then why is this lie, if it's a lie, or why is this narrative continuing to live? Is it just because you believe what you want to believe and that's the way that goes and it happens on both sides?
Yeah, it makes the losers not feel like losers, right? It gives a caveat. It's an excuse. It's funny that you mentioned Philly, Jaffe, because I remember when the 2020 election drama ensued, I really tried to zero in from a provincial perspective out here and because, I mean, first of all, look, like we have a very blue Philadelphia, which makes an otherwise red state purple, right? With some small contribution from Pittsburgh. But the thing about the Philadelphia suburbs, I've said this to Colin before, it's so exactly down the middle here politically in suburban Philly that it's very hard to get a read on there. Not only that, but there's a very polite sense of we don't talk about politics here vibe, the likes of which I have never seen anywhere else. I say this from time to time on the podcast. I have neighbors of 12 to 15 years. I could honestly not tell you more than a couple what their political leanings are because they just don't discuss it. It's this thing of like, let's not even go there type of thing. So that was always frustrating for me because I'm trying to figure out, okay, if this one voted, just trying to get just from maybe even a more molecular perspective of like just my neighborhood. But I honestly don't know because it's so down the middle. There's no lawn signs. There's no bumper stickers. There's no red and blue. It's just like everybody's just like, and you know what? There's a very Kenny Bunkport set, like somewhat wealthy Democrats that have that vibe. And then there's a very rabidly protective of my money, small government right-wing set. And it's almost literally 50-50. So I couldn't even tell you if it was true, but I do get the sentiment of, that was like a way to appease the losing side or a way of the losing side appeasing themselves of like, something must have went wrong in the election because clearly we won type of thing.
So everyone gets a trophy basically.
Participation trophy.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think Colin, do you have any insight into this?
It was lucrative for Denise D'Souza to jump.
It was, for Through the Vote, which are being accused of taking a lot of their donations, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and spending them on private things for the two owners. So.
Which is why, like Chris, our good friend Chris Reagan is always bitching about being accused of being alt-right because as he always says, if I was alt-right, I would just be alt-right. Because it'd be a lot easier and he would probably make a lot of money from it, right?
For me, this gets into a frustrating Trump-esque situation that he finds himself in, self-inflicted always, which is that he has like some nugget of what he's trying to say that makes sense, and for some reason he just can't say it. So a good example of this is like Mexico is going to pay for the wall. It's like, what are you talking about? What he means really is that like they're going to raise tariffs and like have like, remittance taxes and all sorts of things like that. But he doesn't say that. Instead, he says like something ridiculous that doesn't make any sense. Like Mexico is going to pay for the wall. It's like, okay. And I think that this is, I don't want to say totally one of those examples, but it's another kind of shade of that. It's clear to me that there were voting irregularities systemically. And that should be the major argument. It's not about individual batches of fraudulent votes.
So where is that clarity coming from for you? Because I'm looking for that clarity.
So, well, I think it's fairly obvious. Like a big thing in Pennsylvania, for instance. Like the major, divorce yourself from like the court cases and think about the philosophy. So I think a major argument behind parts of this is that state legislatures unconstitutionally invoked mail-in balloting without going through their state legislatures, which is what's necessary. So I think Pennsylvania was one of those states that kind of did it. And I think they did it based on like COVID. So the argument is like, okay, this is now you're introducing major levels of fraud into the voting system, which isn't so one thing you can't tell me is that it doesn't happen on an individual level in some way. And here's how I know. Not that it matters. I don't think it really matters, right? It's not going to like
in
change
terms of affecting the election matters.
Right, exactly. Like it matters, I guess, on an individual level. But yeah, I posted a picture of it when I was still posting on Twitter, and I sent it to the GOP in the state of California, which they think they used as part of their lawsuit amongst many, many, many things, is I got a ballot for the recall election sent to me in California to my address in Virginia. Like addressed to me in Virginia, not with like one of those things that they paste over it where it's like, here's your new address or forwarding it. There was a California ballot for governor of the state sent to someone who lives at a Virginia address. I could have very easily checked the box,
right,
sent it in the mail and voted in the California election. No problem. Okay. So the point is
there are problems in the system that are not malicious. That are just, it's a huge fucking country.
Right, exactly. Mail-in balloting.
It makes those claims feel believable, right?
Right, exactly. Mail-in balloting is a vector in what that can be exposed, because then you get things like ballot harvesting, which definitely happens. But the thing about ballot harvesting is that it's illegal. And ballot harvesting basically means like, oh, everyone in my neighborhood, you get, or like your family or whatever. It's like, make sure to everyone vote, make sure to get your thing and vote. And that's fine. I mean, but the point I think that people are making is, and I totally agree with this 100%. And this is my thing about elections moving forward is it's not going to happen in 2024, but election day should be a national holiday. You should be able to vote for 24 hours beginning 12:01 a.m. until midnight the next day at all of the polling places. No excuses. Voter ID, paper ballots, no early voting, no like mail-in voting, only like military and all of that kind of stuff get there, or like, at embassies and stuff can vote by mail.
Or if you're disabled, obviously.
Just shut it. Well, even then, it's like, make it, this is like my whole thing about voter ID generally, is like,
make a fucking mobile voting booth to people who can't.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like figure out all of these ways to just remove all sorts of excuses. Because as I've said, and you know this because you live in California, Jaffe, is that you can go to a polling place in California, say whoever the fuck you want on that ballot, they have to let you in. They can't check your ID. They don't check your ID. You can literally put your finger on the roll in San Francisco. I remember.
That's not true. I go in, I can only go to one polling place. They check my address with the thing they sent me and says, okay, you're either in the wrong polling place or the right polling place. At least in San Diego and LA.
Yeah, that was not my experience in San Francisco or Santa Monica. They would open these big in San Francisco. First of all, I was voting in someone's garage, which is kind of cool because that's kind of the vibe of.
I mean, it was Mark Maron's garage, but yeah.
And they would have this big book of like this roll, and it would already be open. And I just said a name, and they'd say, "Okay, make me sign a book, part in the book, and then give me my ballot." And
I mean, it's weird there are inconsistencies like that. That's not, I don't support that.
So this is what I'm saying is like, I'm because of my living in San Francisco, where by the way, they were trying to get illegals to vote as well.
Who's they? I mean,
the state, the local government. It was just, and New York did the same thing, and they just struck it down in the Supreme Court. So it's obviously happening. But my whole point is that there should be a universal way to vote. And this becomes a 10th Amendment, like states' rights issue, because it's not described in the Constitution about how you're supposed to vote. So each state does it their own way. But we should have some sort of more standardized way that removes as many vectors of dishonesty as possible. So like, I think early voting, first of all, is insane. Like that doesn't even make any sense. You shouldn't be allowed to vote early. And that's why I say like, just get 24 hours national holiday. Like,
well, and frankly, all the primaries should be on the same fucking day as well. I mean, it's ridiculous that somebody goes first in the primaries.
I agree with that too. I think their argument is that it's impossible to run a national primary. Like you need to actually do it in order. Otherwise, like you're spread so thin, you would only go to California and New York. Like if you were running a national primary, it's like, who gives a fuck about all these other places? We're going to New York City, LA, Texas.
Okay, well, you can do it within a week or worst case, a month. But anyway, go back to your point though, which is voting. And my curiosity there though is every single time a bill has been brought up to have a national voting holiday, which I think that is like 95% popular desired on the part of the American public, the Republicans are the ones who strike it down every single time. It's come up for a vote, four times.
I don't know what the problem is with that. Like, it just seems to me it should be like a big thing. And I'm not saying for a civic reason. I don't believe in the Australian compulsory voting shit. I'm just saying it's like a day. It's like Christmas almost, where it's like it's a day that happens every year, not every 4 years, like because your local elections, whatever, your school board elections, like it's just a day off. And maybe 90% of the people are like just ride it as a day off. But yeah, it's just to like remove all the excuses. Mobile voting, it's the same thing. Free ID, so you have voter ID, but just make it so that there's one way to vote. And the other thing that I think people, so to give you a little bit more clarity, I think too about like maybe the other side's argument, Jaffe, is that there's a lot of skepticism about why it's taking so long to tabulate the votes. And I think that this is a really legitimate question. There are third world countries that have their vote counts like this, and they're not fucking dictatorships that are just poor. They're not like, 99% for one person. How are they doing it? And
are they using paper ballots or are they using computers?
I don't know. Most countries do use paper ballots. It's just the most secure way to vote. But whether they're printed and then inserted into a computer or whatever is a different story entirely. But not voting on a kiosk or whatever. I've only done that once, and that was in Massachusetts. Yeah. So from my point of view, it's just I do understand the argument. Like there was definitely a systemic level of cheating.
But you would agree then, based on all the stuff you're saying, that systemic level of cheating is inherent in the system in general, regardless of who wins any specific election at a national level.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that the systemic level of cheating in the 2020 election was done towards mail-in ballots that generally benefit Democrats. That's why and early voting does too. That's why it's not that those things happened. It's that they're arguing that they happened under COVID emergencies unconstitutionally. And they don't make these arguments because, like you're saying, they're nuanced arguments. Instead, they say, like, we lost the election, it was stolen. It's like, it wasn't literally stolen. And I don't think it was even figuratively stolen. I just think that there are discrepancies that can just be easily solved. Like, this is actually a very important topic that should have national importance. It's like, how do we vote? And it should just, like I said, 24-hour holiday, in person, paper ballots, no early voting, no voting by mail. Voter
and
ID.
Like I said, that's very popular and it's been tried and they just won't do it.
Like,
but just so we're clear, the 2020 election, then your take on it is that because the system is inherently flawed, not bad, but it's just, like you got the thing in Virginia from California. In the case of what happened in 2020, because paper ballots, mail-in ballots tend to aid the Democrats, it wasn't that they engineered COVID that happened under Trump's watch to make it so that they could steal the election. It was that they happened to have gotten lucky with the coin toss that time, and that the way the chips fell, the votes that came in were meaningfully from mail-in, and in that, the Democrats got a bit of a tailwind that the Republicans did not. Okay.
Right. That's exactly right. I don't even think it might have been enough in one of the states, maybe like Michigan or something, but I don't think it would have even been enough to change the outcome of the election. I just think.
So there was no fraud. There was
I don't think, well, maybe with some state governments. I don't know enough about it to like, ultimately it's up to the states to hold their people accountable. If their legislatures just kind of went rogue and use these emergency powers. That's why it's just important to roll it back. Like if I were on the other side, I would want to make it so that we win categorically, like there's no question, right? But the reason a reasonable mind can conclude that there is some question, not based on how the Dinesh D'Souza shit. That's not what I'm saying at all. That kind of stuff probably did happen, but not in great numbers, right? I don't know enough about it. I don't care. What I'm saying is,
if it happened in great numbers, I think we would have some specific cases to point to.
Right. Like, but to me, it's just like, I would want to say like, there's just next time there'll be no reasonable way you can say you got out of this. Like, and I would want to make sure that system existed. And the easiest way to do it is just, again, paper ballots day of, and just count them. And that's how it has to go. And so removing that level. So again, it's one of those great Trumpisms, not to be a defender of Trump. Again, I'm going to vote. If the election was held today, I'd vote for RFK. I'm just straight up about that. Like 100%, voting for RFK if the election was held today. But to Trump's credit, he has some point underneath a lot of what he's saying. For some reason, he just doesn't know how to say it. And that's been frustrating to everyone for a long period of time. Because if he's just 10% more normal,
to be perfectly fair, if he really felt, and I would doubt he does, I think people who work for him probably understand it, but he had the government for 4 years. You think he could have proposed a national holiday for voting? I didn't hear him say that once.
Yeah, he wasn't.
I heard him say that that Clinton actually lost the popular vote. They were lying. You'd think that would be enough to say, hey, you know what? We need to get on this.
Again, it's so stupid though, because what he should be saying is like, it's like baseball. You don't win, you don't win when you get the most hits. You win when you get the most runs. And I won. The electoral vote. Like he can't say anything elegantly. It's like if you just, I've often thought it's like if I could have just been with him for the last 7 years or so, as like it's like just don't say that,
and then would he listen to you?
No way. Yeah, he doesn't listen to anyone.
He's got a chaotic energy that I think sometimes feels intentional. Just a little bit intense.
He is a con man that thinks he's actually smarter than he is, but if you have a little bit of con man in you yourself, which most people do, you can recognize it.
Yeah. Can't bullshit a bullshitter.
Right. And it's like, nah, you're doing that thing. I've done that thing too, but I haven't done it at your level. But I do it with my kids to convince them, Chuck E. Cheese is closed.
But here's the thing too, Jaffe, an important postscript to this, and I'll let you, I don't mean to monopolize your topic, but
no, I appreciate what you're saying. Because
something important that you should consider that I think is an important component of maybe a right-wing view on this is it is materially obvious to people on a certain side of the spectrum that Trump is being victimized by the justice system and adds a certain level of conspiratorial thinking that oozes into everything. Because
why do you think he's being victimized by the justice system?
Oh, I think like what happened to him in New York, for instance, is like insanity. With the ruling where there are no victims, and he has to pay a $350 million fine. So you agree he's guilty? I mean, it was a civic trial, but you agree, right? But it's like what Kevin Leary said. I don't know if you saw that thing when that was going around, the investor, where he's like, dude, everyone does this. Like everyone,
maybe
does this.
They do, but
and he's like, it's almost part of real estate. Like but the point he was making is, I think it was Deutsche Bank was part of it or whatever, and they're like, they took the stand and said that they were happy and want to do business with him again. Like there's no victim, And so to me, that's an example of, I'm bringing that up because it taints this kind of stuff. It's all
I understand why you would bring it up, but I think again, it's nuance. First of all, I mean, to say everybody does it, a lot of people drive drunk too, but nobody's complaining when they get caught and go to jail because they could have killed somebody. So I don't know if that's a really good excuse from Mr. Wonderful.
Well, but what he's saying is like, it's all about the valuation of property and leveraging it for loans. And he's like, it's up to the bank to do the due diligence, and they were happy with the valuation. They did their due diligence. So even if they felt like they were being taken advantage of, they did it willingly. It's an interesting,
but
and then the whole thing in Georgia with Fannie Willis. I mean, that shit's hysterical because that's their best case. And they have some corrupt.
I thought Florida is their best case with the documents in Jack.
Oh yeah, maybe now that they're not charging Biden, I think that's become substantially weaker. The Georgia one, I think, is kind of dead to rights. But now they have some sort of corrupt prosecutor going after him, so they can't get their shit. They can't get their shit straight. It's like this. You have to understand this all adds to the credibility of his arguments, which is the only reason I bring it up. It's not that they are credible arguments. It's that. You could imagine, it's kind of like what I say, Jaffe, about like IGN. We didn't take any bribes, but you can imagine from the outside that you would think that we would have, right? Or
right. So if you were out there making videos about you think it's a corrupt system, right, people would be inclined to go, he should know. He's in that world.
Or you can see how people would see it that way. So I'm in a position with Trump where I'm like, I don't really believe a lot of your arguments, but I can see the environment stacked against you. That to me is materially obvious, right?
Yeah, and this is why we're fucked, because the conversation, and again, I don't, you know a lot more about that side of politics than I do, but to communicate it that way makes me go, okay, right? But that is not how it's communicated. And I'm sorry, but that I assume it's intentional. It's communicated. It doesn't matter. You know my point, but I hear you. I think it's a great point as to why it's more believable, even in the lack of evidence, specific evidence that won't hold up. So there was that, but this is how it gets into 9/11 though, right? Because it goes back to your voting day, your national voting holiday, which is who really is running the country. Now, I am not a 9/11 conspiracy guy. You know, my brother has some real theories about it. I go, well, that, you know, he keeps coming back to this idea of, he's like, I don't know, but it's both buildings fell in what looks like a controlled demolition, almost in the perfect footprint, blah, blah, blah. Then you've got some people saying, oh, that's true. Oh, you've got some people saying, no, it would happen, whatever. I'm not going to, you know, who knows? But so I was always just like, I wouldn't be surprised if the government did something. That would not surprise me at all, but I don't have any evidence of it, and I haven't heard any that really holds up, that isn't debunked by at least someone that seems credible, but they could be full of shit too. Who knows? Okay. So I'm on the internet prepping for my show called I Love the Weird, which is the non-video game show I do sometimes. And I find this story about a guy who wrote this book called False Flag 9/11, self-published 2008. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then it turns out he publishes it, and 2 weeks later, his teenage daughter's been shot in the head, his teenage son's shot in the head, his dog shot and killed, and he's dead, all in the same house. He's murdered, but they say it was suicide, right? 2 weeks after the book comes out. Okay. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. I want to read this book. So I go and I get this book. Or I get it from Amazon, whatever. And this thing, again, I'm not saying what I believe, what I don't believe, because I don't know. But when I read this and it goes into, the guy who wrote it was a 20-year airline pilot veteran, like 747s flying for like United and all these, before he did that, he was one of the Air America pilots, the guys who were running drugs for Iran-Contra and all that stuff for America. So he would be flying in his bosses and stuff to remote locations all over the world at the drop of a hat. And he talks about how there were bases in in Arizona, in the desert, where they would have these Saudi-owned airplane hangars that he would fly people into for training and this, that, and the other. Not for 9/11, but just this was sort of the norm back in those times. And the guy he worked for, it turns out, was killed. Nobody, officially ever came out and said why. So he did a lot of shady stuff, whatever. So then he becomes an airline pilot, proper, civilian. And he's like, I did this work for 20 years. Shut the fuck up, computer, autoplay, motherfucker. It just started talking to me. But now he's flying. He says, I did this for 20 years. It took me like 5 to 6 years of being tested and grilled and reading, phone book size manuals on each individual plane just so I could fly professionally. He's like, you're telling me these guys were able to not only, maybe you train and you can fly a Cessna and keep it in the air and maybe land it on a computer game and a little bit of flight time. But these guys were able to get into a fucking commercial plane, which if you haven't had the proper training, he's like, you can't keep it in the air. Forget driving it into a specific target. He's like, if you want to hit the World Trade Center and you come out of Boston, you got to make sure you're rotated around back towards New York or back towards that part of Manhattan pretty fucking soon. You got to know that. It's not like you're like, let's go to New York. It's a big fucking deal. And to be able to land those planes or crash those planes where they did at that level of precision, he's like, I don't believe these guys weren't trained by someone else. And then he goes into the whole bases in Arizona and all the stuff he's seen about these sort of black ops that these companies run to train people for paramilitary, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That's compelling. That's interesting. I keep reading. And then he starts getting into, and this I didn't know, and I had to look this up because I'm like, this can't be true. But it's true. We know that George Bush Sr., who ran the CIA, ran for president in 1980 against Reagan. He lost, obviously became the VP. James Baker, who was, I think, the chief of staff, I believe, for Reagan, apparently those two guys were good buddies and real tight. And Reagan wanted somebody else as the chief of staff, and they talked him into Baker, right? So Iran-Contra and all that apparently was really driven by Bush. Reagan apparently didn't know all that much about it. So Reagan gets shot in 81. Guy dies, or doesn't die. He misses dying, they said, by an inch. Okay? The guy who shoots him, John Hinckley Jr., this blew my fucking mind. John Hinckley Jr.'s father, and this was reported, I didn't know this, John Hinckley Jr.'s dad was colleagues at worst and pals at best with George Bush Sr., who was the vice president. He ran an energy oil company in Florida and Texas. And then John Hinckley's brother ended up taking over that country, right? So the whole idea of suddenly you've got from 1980, you've got these guys that are sort of, you go back to the whole deep state idea. I don't like the term because it makes it sound more dramatic but maybe it should. But you've got these guys who are potentially maybe even plotting assassination of Reagan. And then suddenly they finally have an opportunity to go into Iraq and do all the oil stuff and all this shit. This blows my fucking mind. Did you know the Hinckley relationship with the Bushes was a thing? Was that reported?
I didn't.
I mean,
but it makes sense that they would think that the powers that be would think that they could engineer another assassination, considering they just did one in 1963.
Right, right. Oh, and apparently Bush, the President Bush was, this is bizarre. I should have tagged it to read it, but apparently George Bush, the president, not his pappy, who was also apparently a fucking monster, was actually in Dallas the day that Kennedy was shot, which is not saying anything, but that's on record that he was there. I'm saying there's something about the Bush family and the Cheneys and the Saudis and all this goes into that. And again, I'm not sitting here saying it's all true. Maybe none of it's true, except the Hinckley stuff and the Air America stuff, because that we know is true now because you can see it on Reuters and shit. My point, though, is all this was going to lead to me going, it's charming we sit around and talk about politics and act as if we have some say in the matter when there are these people that clearly seem to be, if at least some of this is to be taken as fact, that seem to be operating well outside of that. And they're conditioning us to believe we have some control and wave the flag and do a rally speech at Mount Rushmore or whatever. But end of the day, it's all a fucking play and it's a distraction. And I just wanted to bring it up because I thought it was just, I'm never surprised, but I'm always saddened by and amazed by stuff that turns out to be true that you're like, that can't be true, but it ends up being true. And I'm not a tinfoil guy at all.
Yeah, I've realized that you have I don't know if it's like it's not nihilism, but you have a very like
realistic.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
That's how people act. Yeah. Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's just like with our AI conversations with like predetermined, predestination and religion and political outcomes and power. You are very resigned to. I don't
like it. I don't like it, but I think, and I'm very sympathetic. I feel for people, but I think fundamentally we're just a bunch of scared fucking primates running around, and we'll do anything we can to make sure nobody steals our spot in the sun. And that drives almost everything. And I think it's awful. And I feel for all of us, but I also realize that is the root of so much of the pain that we have to suffer through and that we put other people through. It's just that
Kyle,
fear.
You mentioned this to me recently that Jaffe had this philosophy, this sort of overarching lack of autonomy, everything scripted.
That's free will, but
it's kind of, but that's another example, in my opinion. Like you kind of are with Sam Harris and others with like the lack of free will kind of thing. Like it all.
I just think scientifically it makes sense that we have no free will.
Yeah,
I don't want to believe.
I don't agree or disagree.
But
I just think that like there's a certain I don't know. I can predict like a pattern, I guess is what it would be.
Yeah. The only difference between me and Sam Harris is he's really fucking smart.
Yeah, he is and he isn't. But
when it comes to brain science, I think he's
smart. He he has the worst Trump derangement syndrome of almost anyone I've ever
You
seen.
want him operating on your brain, not me. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. I like him. I've listened to him for years, but I actually stopped paying. I used to pay for his podcast.
Yep.
And I stopped last year because of his whole thing about he's just gone, in my opinion, he's kind of coming back a little bit, but like off the deep end with COVID stuff, with the Trump stuff, where it's just like, I don't know. Cause he was making arguments basically where he was wrong about a lot of things, but he was making these arguments being like, but if I was right, kind of thing. I'm like, I'm done with you, dude. You're annoying.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But anyway, so it all leads to that. So there's no solve, we can talk 9/11 if you want. I don't fucking know. The official story is, no, this guy was crazy. He was going through a divorce. He was depressed. I'm like, okay, but it's weird.
Compelling.
It's weird. He publishes it and 2 weeks later, he's dead.
All that.
And he kills his family and his dog.
And the dog.
And then, come on, that's that. And he worked for a company, the Black Ops company that would go around and do assassinations. And
that's crazy. Jaffe, I'm not saying like the conspiracy theory thing isn't compelling and sometimes pretty believable, like this one, and frightening. But there's something about the conspiracy theory thing dating back time immemorial where it's like, if any one of these, and think back to like the earliest one you could think of, like all the assassinations of the 60s, let's say, right? MLK, Malcolm X, JFK, all that. Or earlier, whatever you want, up to now. If any one of these things was actually proved out, proof positive, can you even imagine the level of chaos that would ensue?
Nobody will care.
Because now everything's believable.
That's right. We're all desensitized. It's like the aliens thing.
You think so?
I know so, because we're seeing it play out. The fact that you've got literal Democrats and Republicans coming out of classified meetings. And this guy the other day, this wasn't a week, this wasn't 2 months ago. This was February 7th. A Republican comes out of one of those meetings and says to the reporter, and not many reporters are even covering it, but you can see it on the internet. Who is the guy? Not Grush, the guy
Graves.
No, he was the guy before that who talked about Lou Elizondo.
Oh yeah.
They literally asked him about, because the guy who they had interviewed under classified he basically said all the stuff that Elizondo has said. He's like, yeah, he basically, this guy eyewitness just corroborated it, classified to a group of senators. Right. I mean, and nobody cares. And if you look at the stuff that Lou Elizondo claims, you're like, some shit's going down, and it doesn't have to be UFOs, but it's something fucking worth.
He was the one that reported on how like a spacecraft approached like a bunch of nuclear silos and shut them down.
Yeah,
shit, right?
That's right. I believe that was him. There's like 6 of them that kind of were in that orbit.
Yeah,
but
you're right. Like it's so funny because I feel connected to it because I watch a bunch of the shit on YouTube, but you have to dive so deep. You don't even know what's real and what's not in some sense. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, when they're in the halls of Congress though, and they're walking out from the meeting and they're being interviewed. I mean, it could be a deep fake, but it's probably not. I don't know, man. It's not nihilism. I like people. I love people's souls and hearts. I think people just want to be happy and be good to each other. But I think the fear, that lizard brain just controls us way too much. And I hope we survive long enough to get to Star Trek. But let's be clear, it's already been preordained if we will or not, because there's no free will.
Right, exactly. That's what I was saying. Like, what does it matter? Yeah. Well, are we satisfied? Is there anything else left to be said? Gene? Dag?
I'm not sure where we're at in the conversation.
Gene was like, I just shit myself because I haven't gone to the bathroom in like 5 hours.
It's time to wrap, I think. It was fun. Now, did you feel like this was fun and productive? I like talking like this. I thought it was
I thought it was fun.
That it was fun and that it was useful and it was fair. That's my opinion. What do you think, Jaffe? Yeah.
I think to the audience, I know it's a conversational podcast. I get really excited when there's a topic I'm excited about, and I don't mean to talk over people and I don't mean to interrupt, and I hate those podcast guests, but I'm one of them and I'm doing the best I can. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I always love talking about this is what I wish adult parties were. instead of going into a goddamn room and hey, what do you think of the fucking stock market today? And it's like, I'll talk about it with you if you really want to drive deep, but if you just want to fucking make small talk, I'd rather be on my phone playing, Wordle or something while
Totally, dude. I hate small talk. I hate it.
Yeah.
I'm on the same wavelength as you. Dig.
Yeah.
Did you feel like this was a productive podcast? What'd you think?
I always learn a lot. I enjoy listening to everybody's perspective. And it's weird for me because I get a little uncomfortable if it's not story based or anything that's comedic, but I just like having conversations. So I'm easy peasy, it's fine for me.
What about you, Gene? How are you feeling about our conversation today?
I had fun. Adult parties. I hate small talk too.
Oh, fuck you. The parties you go to, people wear masks and come over and want to fuck in front of you in a corner.
You don't get there's no small talk there, is it?
No.
That's true. Yes,
no, that's what I'm saying. You don't know anything about real life. You live in a fucking action movie.
The parties I go to reflect how little I care about small talk. Is that they're either at nightclubs where you can't fucking hear each other, or they're at regular clubs and everyone has a dick in their mouth. So,
regular clubs, everyone doesn't have a dick in their mouth, Gene. I don't know what kind of clubs you're going to.
DC, that is the regular club, I guess.
Exactly.
If I walked into a club and everyone had a dick in their mouth, I would say I'm not in this club for very long. It depends who the mouth was.
There are actually clubs in Asia where you would like just go to a bar and then there would be a girl under the bar and then she would just like take her.
That's fantastic. But if she's listen, I knew a girl once and she says to me, this guy I was dating just moved to Taiwan, was it? Or someplace. When she said it, I'm like, and we were sitting around lunch and some of the friends were like, ooh, that's bad. She goes, I know. I'm like, what's the problem? Apparently it's not Taiwan, but there's some place, Thailand, where apparently it's just like the sex trafficking and
Thailand,
pedophilia and all this shit. Yeah. It's like if you want to move to fucking Thailand, there's a reason. And it ain't because, you got a job at a bank that's really paying you well.
Yeah, no, it's the same stereotype that Elon Musk was operating on when he calls random people pedos. It's like, oh, you're just in Thailand and you must be a fucking pedophile.
Yeah, that was a random
guy. That is the rumor, right? That's kind of the
probably reputation. Not about the fucking guy that Elon said that to, but yes,
right.
Yeah, Sagan
do you have a lot of listeners from Thailand?
We probably do. I would have to look on YouTube. I'm sure we do.
I'd be fascinated. Anyway,
Saget and Bison were both from Thailand in Street Fighter, right?
Correct.
That's right. Yeah.
Interesting.
That was my first exposure to Thailand.
Yeah, the Shadow Lu. Maybe they were trying to tell us something.
I actually met Thai people. I was like, you look nothing like fucking Bison. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, was Bison from Russia?
No, Bison's Thai. I think they're both from. I thought they were both from Thailand. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think Sagat is actually Thai, but Bison is just like the white overlord dictator. Like,
Gene's like, do you guys have any girls like Sagat who can stretch like that? I'll give you.
Dalsim is the one that stretches.
Tiger.
Oh, who's Sagat? Which one's Sagat?
He's like the tall one that does like tiger, like and like shoots the fireballs and does the
uppercut. Indian guy from India. I mean, not Sagat.
Dalsim.
Stretcher. Yeah.
Guru Dalsim.
All right, my friends.
Combat guy.
Anyways. It was good to be here with you guys today. Appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me today. Good to be here with all of you out there. Hope you enjoyed our podcast. Thank you for listening to it. Patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access as always. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.